This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem.
Well, how about a trip down memory lane? I mentioned somewhat offhandedly a few videos ago that I was contemplating, and have been for a while, trying out some compilation videos. And the very obvious choice for me to do is seasons of Doctor Who. There's problems with that though, because I've been doing this a long time. And there's a whole bunch of those things that I don't really stand by. It's not even just a matter of my having presented masculine at the time. I just think the analysis isn't particularly good or deep or interesting to watch. There is also the matter of a lot of the stuff having more than one review of it. Starting from Capaldi on, there's at least 2 reviews for Capaldi's entire era and from Jodie Whittaker's entire era, as well as I did the Take 2 reviews. So do I include both? Do I do one compilation of the originals, ones of the Take 2, only the Take 2s, because I think those are more thorough analysis? I don't know. And trying to figure that out has kept me from trying to do anything compilation related. But that having been said, you know what I've only got one video on? It's fairly recent. All the new stuff. The 14th Doctor and the 15th Doctor. So here's what we're going to do as a little bit of an experiment. We are going to have compilations for the entirety of the 14th Doctor's run, and then in November and December, respectively, I will put out compilations for all of Ncuti Gatwa's first season and all of Ncuti Gatwa's second season. And this is going to kind of be a proof of concept. If these do decently for what I need them to do, admittedly, a big part of my trying to do this is to give myself an easy week so that I can maybe catch up on some other stuff. But if they do well enough, then maybe I will figure out how I want to tackle other stuff, and you'll see other compilations in future. By no means is this going to start taking over the channel, but, you know, every now and then I could use an easy week. I could really use it. And I'm even going to throw some other stuff that aren't just the reviews of the 3 specials. What stuff? Well, watch and find out. Hope you enjoy it.
And finally, number 1, and this is a big one. Like, some of these I will grant there's like vaguely possible there was ever so slight sliver of a way that it can be made to work. This one, no. I'm drawing a hard line on this. No. Never. The Doctor Who TV show should never, ever have the Doctor regenerate into an actor that has already played the part. Now, a couple things I have to point out about this. One, I do know that canon-wise in the show, they have opened up that possibility due to Tom Baker's appearance in The Day of the Doctor, which is not something I was against. I still like that. But what I liked about that is because obviously they're not going to cast Tom Baker again in this part, but what I liked about it is, to me, that just implied the endlessness of this show, because we will actually never see the character ever regenerate into this actor again, because like I said, he's never going to play the part again, which means we're never going to reach the end, which means Doctor Who effectively goes on forever. Even if the show ends again, we will never truly reach an end point for this character. That's why I was in favor of that scene, aside from the fact that Tom Baker was just wonderful and delightful. But by implying that Tom Baker was a later regeneration of the Doctor, it opens up the possibility that Matt Smith could come back, David Tennant could come back, you know, any of the living Doctors, feasibly. But I mean, realistically, those would be the 2 that people would be clamoring for, at least at this point. And I think that more than anything else, more than any of the other things I've named, more than almost anything that I can think of, would be the death knell of this show. Because that would be a point at which the show would cease evolving. The show would stop trying to be anything other than fan service. Because the instant the show does, and this show already can get very tied up in its own history and continuity and minutia. Sometimes decently, sometimes to its detriment. But doing something like that, having Matt Smith or David Tennant or Christopher Eccleston or any previous actors play the part, be the Doctor again. Not like, here are some extra adventures you didn't know about, but like, at the end of Jodie Whittaker's one, she regenerates into Matt Smith. That might be the thing that would make me stop watching Doctor Who. Because at that point, remember I said about breadth of possibilities, endless possibilities? At that point, that feels like a bigger restriction on possibilities than anything else. And what I mean by that is the show is no longer looking forward. It is only looking back. It will be only looking into its own history. It'll only be gazing into its own navel. It is a regressive move. It would be a deliberate attempt to try and be something that it was before instead of figuring out what it can now be. And Doctor Who has always been a show that has evolved through the casting of the Doctor, through the changes in aesthetics, through the changes in the creative team and shifts in priorities in the writing. The show has always been evolving, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And sometimes they do bring back older elements, and that's fine. But when you literally start putting the old face back on the character again, that's when there's nowhere forward to go anymore. Now you're just swimming in nostalgia. And that might break me if this show ever did that. And that is why I think that is the number one thing this show should never, ever do.
If Tennant is the next Doctor, what were your thoughts beyond that? See, I notice you're wording that very carefully because I've gone on record multiple places saying I have no opinion until it's confirmed. And so you're wording your question as, well, if it was confirmed, then what would your opinion be? Sneaky, nice try, not answering it. Look, it would be a bad idea. Actually, you know what? Screw it. Let's dig into this a little bit. The idea of bringing back David Tennant to play the Doctor again is a bad idea. It is a fundamentally bad idea. And before anyone shows up in the comments telling me, oh, well, the curator said he could revisit old faces. Like, I know that. It's not a question of they can't do it because of X, Y, Z. It's all made up. They can come up with a narrative justification for why they should do it. That doesn't make it a good idea. And the other thing I've seen people go like, oh, well, he's not going to be playing the 10th Doctor again. It's going to be David Tennant reinterpreting the Doctors, who will be a different Doctor, not just doing his old version. Like, yeah, sounds good. Still a bad idea. This kind of cyclical, recursive, masturbatory nonsense. I'm knocking stuff over. This is what I dread for Doctor Who. This is the exact reason why I don't want Russell T Davies to spend any time retconning the Timeless Child, as much as I hate it, because stop looking back, move forward. And I don't care if he'd be playing a different version of the Doctor. Casting Tennant to play the Doctor again is a retrograde move. It is looking back instead of trying to progress. And whatever you feel about Chibnall's time, and I have not liked most of it, he did try and move things forward. Did it work? No, but it is healthier for this show and for its future to find a way to move forward than to start looking back and just jerking off its own friggin' continuity. It's fan service wankery. The whole idea be a terrible notion. And I've seen a million things like, oh, well, you'd only do one series. Oh, it would just be a couple of specials. And then it would be something. It's a bad idea.
I don't care how you package it. I don't care what you wrap it in. Fundamentally, it is a bad idea, and it is unhealthy for the state of the franchise. Don't do it. And don't tell me any reasons why you think I should be more optimistic about the idea. I'm not. It is the kind of thing I dread Doctor Who doing. And I have for a long time. I'm very exasperated this stream. Hope people are getting entertainment out of that. Hope it's just a cameo on the 60th. Oh, I fully expect him to show up in the 60th. That I don't doubt and would not have a problem with. I'm fine with multi-doctor stories. But, like, that's not what people are talking about. Feel free to decide if this is too potentially spoilery, but the David Tennant coming back as the 14th Doctor rumors flying right now. There's nothing to indicate we should be taking those seriously, is there? Honestly, as much as I love David Tennant, I hope they don't go there. No, there is absolutely nothing to indicate. There are people who are claiming, oh, the leak source has been right about other stuff without actually providing information as to who the leak source is, or, you know, it's a game of telephone. Like, it could be anything from he is going to appear in the 60th anniversary, and that has been twisted by, you know, it by being leaked in a slightly off form. It could be that. Or it could just have been pulled out of the ether from fans who saw that Russell T. Davies was coming back, and they're like, ooh, maybe Tennant. And then they start talking about it as if it actually will, because the conversation can shift from, oh, well, maybe this would be maybe this would happen, to, wouldn't it be cool if this happened, to, I bet this will happen, to, this is happening. Like, it's a standard, like, self-creating rumor mill progression. Man, this really did become the topic of the Discord. Since Tennant being cast as the next Doctor is unlikely and a bad idea, thank you. What would you think of him reprising his role as 10 throughout a future season, i.e., not just for an anniversary special for some timey-wimey shenanigans alongside whichever new Doctor we get or any other previous Doctors? No, I do not think any Doctor, especially a fan favorite like Tennant, should be brought back on anything other than a one-off basis. Weaving him throughout a future season is just going to beg the comparison to whoever the current Doctor is and ignite all the more divides about why won't you just give us another series with Tennant if you're going to have him around. The one exception I'll make is, I'm shocked this has not happened already. I would be okay if they wanted to bring in the meta-crisis Doctor that is living with Rose in the parallel dimension. Now, when I say bring in, I don't mean take over the role of the Doctor. I don't mean that at all. But I mean, given that he is human, that he has been earthbound, and that it is now, oh God, like 15 years later or whatever, seeing how he's changed, seeing how he's different. See, it's funny. The reason I say it's funny that this hasn't happened yet is I had kind of made the assumption that half the reason to even create that situation where there was a completely separate Doctor who it's established firmly would age, would be able to bring David Tennant back at a later date and not worry about having to cover for the fact that he is visibly older. Which is an issue that wasn't so much of a problem in multi-Doctor stories back in the classic era because the definition was so low. But these days, it shows. You can tell. Honestly, you could kind of tell in The Day of the Doctor. He looked older. And again, that's not like he's aging quite well, but I always kind of assumed that was the point of creating the Meta-Crisis Doctor, to be able to do that. And they still haven't. So I'd be up for that. I don't want it to dominate like a season-long story, but if, I don't know, for a finale or a one-off or a special, if they wanted to touch on that, that's probably what I'd be most okay with in terms of the idea of bringing him back for anything other than like the 60th anniversary. For now, the second week in a row, Russell T. Davies has decided to drop
major Doctor Who news, or at least his era has, although he was quoted in it as well. So, like, I should just plan to not have my weekends to me anymore, or at least have the start of my work week completely obliterated from being able to plan anything, just deal with whatever Doctor Who news there is. So, it has been confirmed that both David Tennant and Catherine Tate are returning as the Doctor and Donna for the 60th anniversary special to air in 2023. So this is big news. Donna has not been seen on the show since The End of Time Part 2, which was the last of the David Tennant specials between Series 4 and Series 5. And Tennant has not taken on the role since The Day of the Doctor, which aired as a number of specials in between Series 7 and 8. So it's been a while for both of them. And this is obviously very exciting. A lot of people have been saying that they would like to see either or both of these characters back. And there is a lot of rampant speculation going on, including some really bizarre stuff. So I'm going to deal with some of that quickly because as absurd as it is, I've seen it suggested in multiple places. So let's deal with a couple of things. I have no conception of why anyone would think that David Tennant is coming in to play anyone other than the 10th Doctor, which was who he already played. There's one other minor possibility, put an asterisk on it, but I'm mostly going to be addressing that. I'm surprised they haven't done this, but I don't think it is, but I'll come back to that. But I've seen people flat out suggest, well, maybe Tennant will be the 14th Doctor for the course of the special, and then he'll regenerate into Ncuti Gatwa, and he'll actually be the 15th. Because when they announced that Ncuti Gatwa was going to be the Doctor, they didn't say the 14th Doctor, they just said the Doctor. No, they did say the 14th Doctor. The official announcement on the official Doctor Who page of the BBC says 14th Doctor. So scrap all the nonsense. I know a lot of you are still trying to work your fan theories as to how David Tennant was going to come back and be the Doctor again, or the Valeyard or something, and you're trying to retrofit them into the new data. Just stop! Please! That said, we don't know a lot of the specifics about how this is going to work. Russell T Davies himself has been very coy about this, floating all kinds of stuff and basically saying, well, maybe this is a missing story from the time when they were together. Maybe it's an alternate timeline. Maybe it's a dream. Maybe it's a flashback. So he's playing coy right now in terms of what this actually is or how big of a part it is going to be in the story. Because that's the other thing. When dealing in multi-Doctor stories, the amount of time that any given Doctor gets can range wildly. You can get your instances like, the 2 Doctors, or even the Day of the Doctor with Tennant, the War Doctor, and the 11th Doctor. But, there were also these tiny little snippets of a bunch of other Doctors, including Capaldi. That was kind of the debut where he debuted his attack eyebrows. So the size and scope varies wildly. That said, I'm not sure I'm going to expect it to be super small. Then there's the other speculation like, who else is going to be back? I'm going to float this right now. I don't think anyone else is going to be back. Not anyone else major. There might be other characters who haven't shown up in a while, but I don't think we're going to get any other Doctors. As far as viable options go, we have a number of living Doctors. But Tom Baker already made what I think feels like a very appropriate final appearance in Day of the Doctor. Peter Davison has already appeared with the Time Crash short, so he's kind of accounted for here. Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, maybe, but if they're really trying to push, sort of reinvigorating the modern era of Doctor Who, it would make more sense to pull from the modern era for Doctors. Eccleston won't work with Davies. That seems still at this point pretty clear. I would be very shocked if that ever happened. And Matt Smith, while not out of the realm of possibilities, never worked with Davies. So he wouldn't have the inclination and the pull to come back that
David Tennant would. Similarly with Peter Capaldi. That doesn't take them out of the running, but it does make David Tennant a much more obvious pick with RTD coming back. The other reason that I think there probably won't be anybody else really of note coming back is that if you're bringing back the most popular doctor and companion pairing, I'm going off of ratings, which is how someone like an organization like the BBC would look at it. Ratings-wise, Series 4 was the most popular, most successful series of modern era Doctor Who. So, bringing them back is kind of all you need, and you don't necessarily want to dilute their impact. Not to mention there's a lot of logistics to cover if they're bringing Donna back in anything other than like this was an adventure they went on during their normal time, but we hadn't seen it before because of the situation that Donna was left in at the end of her tenure, where she, spoilers for years ago, where she does not remember the Doctor anymore, and she can't. It will kill her to remember him. So that's always been sort of the big sticking point, the idea of bringing back Donna Noble. But given that Davis himself is floating all these other possibilities, there are ways around that. Now, I had mentioned before, like, one possibility of who David Tennant could be other than the 10th Doctor, and it is something that I am kind of still surprised the trigger has not been pulled on, and that's the Metacrisis Doctor. That's the Doctor that went off with Rose. Because my honest assumption when that happened was always, oh, that's so they can bring David Tennant back later and not have to worry about accounting for the fact that he is visibly aged. Except he hasn't really visibly aged. I think he might very well be an immortal vampire or a Highlander. So that hasn't happened, and they haven't need to pull the trigger on that. But the main reason I don't think that's gonna come into play is that Doctor, while that came about during the time when the Doctor was with Donna, that Doctor is connected to Rose, not specifically to Donna. And so I think the things you'd have to cover to have it be the Metacrisis Doctor and Donna, I don't know. That seems like a lot of unnecessary narrative hoops to jump through when you could just have it be, the main universe, 10th Doctor and Donna. And while there are still things to overcome, logistical hurdles to deal with, that'll probably be a lot cleaner. And you don't want to bog down too much of the story in technobabble explaining how the story's even allowed to happen in the first place. So am I excited about this? I don't know. I'm nervous, is what I am. Donna is my favorite companion. And while Tennant is not my favorite Doctor, he is the best when he is with Donna. And Series 4 has historically been my favorite series. It's currently sitting in my second favorite series of modern era Doctor Who. I like Series 4 a lot. I like these two together a lot. So what's the problem? Well, frankly, I'm very worried about overshadowing Ncuti Gatwa. And I don't mean that in a sense of like he can't hold his own against Tennant. I'm sure he'll do fine. I don't think Davis would have cast him if he thought he couldn't hold his own with another Doctor. It's more an issue of if you're going to give the fandom the new Doctor, but also the old favorite, then the new Doctor's really not going to get the focus that maybe he needs or deserves. Now, here's the thing. At time of recording, as best as I could find, if this has been confirmed somewhere, I could not find it. I found various references to it, but nothing that really cited a source definitively that seemed trustworthy to me, and that is this. We don't know if the 60th anniversary to air in 2023, presumably in November, that's just based off being as close to the actual anniversary as possible. We don't know if that will be the first story in which Ncuti Gatwa will appear and play the Doctor. However, most things kind of indicate and lean towards that being the case. We're too far along in the year, most likely, for them to throw together a holiday or a New Year's, Christmas or a New Year's special. I'd be very surprised if that ended up happening.
I had kind of been holding out hope that we would get Series 14, whenever that airs, before the 60th anniversary special. But there really isn't a ton of indication that that is going on and in the works, because... So here's the thing. In terms of the timing of this announcement, there is a very good chance, and because this has happened historically with Doctor Who in terms of announcing guest stars, they generally announce them shortly before filming begins, because once they start shooting, especially if they have anything that gets shot in an area accessible to the public, it's going to end up leaking. Because people will see, oh, there's David Tennant in the pinstripe, and oh my gosh, he's with Catherine Tate. Somebody will see that. Somebody will take a cell phone picture of it. So you announce it ahead of when you start the shooting so that you get to announce it and it's not leaked. The thing is, while the indication was, generally speaking, that Ncuti Gatwa probably got announced when and in the way that he did to get ahead of a leak, I still believe that's probably the case. There's been no indication of him being involved in shooting yet. Definitely not enough to have gotten like a special shot or what have you. And things seem to indicate right now, and a lot of places seem to believe, and I don't have a reason to doubt this other than my own, I wish it wasn't true, that the 60th anniversary is going to be his first outing as the Doctor. And I just feel like that's... I don't want to say completely bungling the first impression, but it's going to be really difficult to find a way to have him shine and show what he's going to bring to the Doctor and give him the spotlight which any Doctor should have in their first story, while also not leaving a bunch of longtime fans annoyed and feeling like you wasted or underused David Tennant and Catherine Tate. Because if you're going to bring them back, you kind of should do something pretty momentous with them. And those are two creative interests that are very at odds. Because if you're going to bring these two back, you better do something big with them. But if you do something big with them, how are you going to properly introduce and deliver and sell this new Doctor when this has to take so much time, attention, priority? Is it impossible to balance? No. But it's a setup that concerns me. Now, my hope here is that my inclination that the 60th anniversary is going to be the next Doctor Who episode proper after the centenary special, which will be in October, and that's Jodie Whittaker's last appearance, that there will be something in between. Whether it's a special, like I said, at this point, probably too late for them to throw together Christmas or New Year, but you want to do another Easter special? You can do that. Davies did an Easter special. Planet of the Dead was an Easter special. You could do that. It's probably too much to hope for a full series, all of Series 14, but that's my hope, that we get something to give us a good spotlight, get us a chance to fall in love with this Doctor without the X also being in the room, the X that a lot of people are still pining for. I know I just turned Doctor Who and watching Doctor Who into a relationship metaphor, but I hope you followed my thinking on that. Until such time as it is 100% confirmed that the 60th anniversary is or is not Gatwa's first appearance as the Doctor, I'm going to be nervous to find out what's the case. Once I know for certain either way, I'll either still be nervous because it will be his first episode and I'll be worried about the outcome of that, or I'll be relieved because it's not. But as I said, most things that I can find right now seem to indicate that that's the path it's likely to go. And yeah, that makes me nervous. And I don't want to feel nervous because I like Tennant and I love Catherine Tate. I love Donna.
Oh, nerves. We'll see what happens as we get more information. Probably dropped on a Sunday again, when I'm not planning on shooting. And bumping my entire schedule for the week out of whack as I edit this and get this uploaded in the following morning. Davies, stop messing with me. And then, of course, I can't not bring up the very end where the Doctor not only regenerates into Tennant, but like the clothing gets replaced, which is weird. That's new. Not necessarily something I expect to get addressed, but maybe because we're already dealing clearly with a very anomalous regeneration. I did call both of the lines that Tennant was going to have, starting with, I know these teeth. And then, of course, what? 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 I knew that was going to be it. And knowing it didn't make me smile any less as it happened. I do think they need to be very careful with this. And I think I've said in the past that I think is a terrible idea to have the Doctor regenerate into a former face. I've gone on record with that. They have now done that. I will say that there is one caveat that I didn't take into account that is currently in place that makes me still nervous about this, but certainly much more okay with it than I would have been on premise, which is that we know this is for a short run because we already know who the next Doctor is after this. And so being so upfront that this is limited, short time, anomalous, while I still don't love that egg getting cracked of this idea of like, well, we've established we can do it. I mean, technically they established that they could do it back in Day of the Doctor with the great curator and bring back Tom Baker and just saying you'll revisit some of the old favorites. So like it's already been established, but now they've actually done it as a thing for the Doctor for however many specials we end up getting. I now strongly suspect that we'll get more than just the 60th, but even if that's all we get, like this is short time. And that's a decent way to do it, even though I don't love that seal's broken. Whether or not it was worth it will depend on what happens. So we'll deal with that when we get there. It really is starting to feel targeted. The release of these things. Just to mess with whatever else I've got going on. I don't know for certain what day I'll get this out, but I am in fact recording it on Christmas Day. Davies, stop messing with me. Or at least do something in your next tease that makes it clear you're targeting me in specific. Then I'll know you're just trying to piss me off. Anyways, we have a teaser for the 60th anniversary. Now, depending on how this goes in terms of copyright claims, because BBC is weird and wonky. They have a tendency to claim things over 10 seconds. Trailers, they'll sometimes let go. This entire thing may end up on the main channel. The immediate reaction may end up in the break room, and then more thorough thoughts on the channel. I don't know. BBC makes my life hard too. And also they suck for other reasons, which you saw at the front end tag. But in any case, let's take a look.
Sometimes I think there's something missing.
I bet you do, Donna.
Like I had something lovely.
Okay, that hurts.
And it's gone.
Oh.
I don't know who I am anymore.
The show is just beginning. Worldwide premiere.
What are you up to?
Who are they?
Monsters.
I don't believe in destiny.
Was
but
that
if
Beep the
destiny
Meep?
exists, then it is heading for Donna Noble.
Did they actually pull that trigger?
If she
Whoa.
ever remembers me, she will die.
Alright, we are holding to that.
He's not there. You can't see him.
Alvy! Someone tell me what the hell is going on here?
I would like to know. I would like to know that too. So,
Don't forget to click below to subscribe.
wow. Oh, it's so weird hearing him say that. Okay. So it is, as most teasers tend to be, light on specifics, but there's a couple things we can glean here. Donna does have that sense that something's missing. That's not a total shock. There were small moments of that, and Wilf kind of talked about it in The End of Time, where he noticed, like, sometimes she gets this look. So that's not a completely new thing. The idea that part of her not necessarily remembers, but she knows something's missing. Which, first of all, ow, right in the feels. Ha! So there's that, for starters. And yeah, that really looked like Beep the Meep. So if you aren't deep into fairly obscure Doctor Who lore and or missed when this became a big thing in the discourse of things like Doctor Who fandoms on Twitter, back when Twitter wasn't a raging dumpster fire at all hours, Beep the Meep is a cute and cuddly and furry and big-eyed creature originating from the monthly comic strips that were in Doctor Who Monthly. And so far as I understand Beep the Meep, because I looked into him a little, which is why I recognized him. Like, I'm not deep enough into lore to have recognized him if he hadn't had like conversations had about him, because people were joking that he was going to show up in this. I can't remember now if that was actually based off anything or if people were just randomly joking about it. To my understanding, Beep the Meep is actually a bit villainous, or at least at the very least not trustworthy. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out. If I were to guess, that's going to be a small Easter eggy kind of appearance. I fully expect that Neil Patrick Harris's character, which I feel like we can fairly safely assume is the Celestial Toy Maker. At least that's what I'm going to assume until proven otherwise. I think we can still assume he's going to be the primary villain, especially because, all right, how am I going to put this? Given that they are tipping the hand that Beep the Meep is in this, and RTD should be savvy enough of how the fandom tends to operate, that they would have recognized him, and even the ones who didn't want, they would have caught on because it would have spread amongst the fans, and then people would realize, oh, not normally trustworthy. So having Beep the Meep end up being villainous would only have worked if he was not in some way hinted at, shown, or teased prior to the release of the special. I think within that, it could have worked if he just showed up, because then whoever didn't recognize him would be surprised. But now there's enough time for everyone to figure out who the heck that is, except for people who go way out of their way to avoid spoilers. And I'd say, bless you folks, but you're probably not even watching this if you're that dedicated to it. So my assumption is that he's going to be covered as a very minor note, or possibly even just as the cold open. I don't expect him to get a ton of time. We get the exact same glimpse of Shudigatwa, which works as a punctuation on the trailer, especially as a closing note for, the Doctor being like, I don't know who I am anymore, and Doctor being like, who is that person? And her mother, be like, you can't see him. And just in terms of I'm tired. It's Christmas Day. In terms of the build of the trailer, building up to Shudigatwa going, what the hell is going on here? I'm doing the accent wrong. Forgive me. But, building up to him doing that,
That definitely works. It is still a little bit disappointing that it is the same clip that we've already seen of him. So if they were going to show him again, I wish we would have seen a little more. But then again, I suppose it's probably best not to oversell his presence in the 60th, given that presumably he will appear either only at the very end of these specials at the point of regeneration, or possibly be hinted at prior to that. And it's probably not something that should be overemphasized, because then you run the risk of basically having shown nearly all of his screen time in just the trailers. So like, I both get and am disappointed by it being the exact same clip in the exact same line. Yeah, oh, Donna hit me in the feels really hard. It was interesting seeing her mother again. I have mixed feelings about her mother. Not like as a character. I don't think she's a bad character. I mean, like as a person, you know, she's not a great person, and she certainly hasn't been a particularly helpful or supportive mother to Donna. She loves Donna. I don't think she doesn't love Donna, but you know, her love is I don't know, slightly acidic. They haven't shown Wilf yet. They seem to be holding back for that, which, depending on how much he appears in it, again, might be preserving, you know, that, or maybe even saving it for later teases, because that would make sense as a build. Because like our first very like little tiny clips and glimpses were Tennant, Neil Patrick Harris, and Ncuti Gatwa. And now we're getting a little bit more of Donna, a little bit more of her mother. We get a glimpse of Rose, this new character named Rose, who we don't really know the deal with yet. We get Beep the Meep. We get these insectoid-looking things, which might be something. Somebody with a more thorough knowledge of Doctor Who monsters will probably identify those. I don't recognize them. But, you know, we're getting these more glimpses, but if they're, you know, we're still a ways off from these airing. So it would make sense to hold back some stuff until further teasers. I suspect that truly the only reason that this was released now is to have something go out on Christmas, because Davis has expressed his desire, you know, to really have Doctor Who be a major part of the holidays again. And given that there is no new episode to air for not even just for Christmas, but for holidays at all, not even a New Year special this year, this is, I suspect, kind of the substitute for that. Otherwise, I think this trailer would have come out some months down the road, but they're still going to need to do some new trailers later on to build up to the actual release. And I think waiting on Wilf till later trailer would make a lot of sense. So I expect later trailers are going to clarify a little bit more about Neil Patrick Harris, who he's playing, if not what he's up to. Show us Wilf. Maybe give us a little more sense of Rose. It depends. It depends on how much RTD wants to give away in advance, and or how much of this is a misdirect, because he's kind of known for doing that too. But we'll see. As a trailer, as a minute-long trailer, it is solid. It's a solid piece of work. It has me intrigued. It adds in enough new elements that it's not having me going, yeah, okay, no, this tells me nothing new. This does tell me some stuff new, but also not a ton. I don't know everything that's going to go on, especially given that there are 3 specials. And I'm right now presuming that most, if not all, of the clips we have seen are only going to be from the first special. That's my own assumption. That's not based on anything. I have no insider knowledge. That's just my own assumption. And hope, because I've mentioned this before in general. I'm the kind of person who, when I see something in a trailer, part of my brain doesn't fully relax until we've gotten to see it in the thing, which does mean that sometimes things fully not showing up in trailers actually really irritates me. Just in terms of part of my brain never relaxes. So if only for that reason, I'm hoping, like maybe the Ncuti Gatwa clip, but I'm hoping as little as possible, ideally none of the rest of it, is actually stuff from later specials, because it's, part of me will never relax watching that first special if there are chunks of footage like, oh, we still don't know what's going on with all the, but that's a me thing. So yeah, it's a pretty good piece. And despite this disrupting my day again with these little drops, I am smiling. So it's obviously doing something right. I like the tone of Tennant's Doctor. I like that he is unsure, that he is on the back foot. If only because a big part of his persona during his era was swagger and confidence. And like many of the times when that was shaken up was some of the best stuff. Midnight. I know it's something a lot of folks like about Waters of Mars. I'm not as hot on that one as other people, but like when it's there, it's really interesting. When he's not so confident, when he's not so, oh, I am very good, and all of that. When he's less sure of himself, interesting things happen. Not necessarily better things inherently, but if we've only got him for a short time, especially to start, I would like to see him unsure, questioning, not fully confident, because that's something that can build over the special so that by the time Tennant wraps up this short run regeneration, he can get back to that confidence. And in my mind, ideally, be far more accepting of the regeneration. And that could be his own little mini arc across these. That starting out so unsure, because he was supposed to be done, and now he's back, but he doesn't know why. And to have him go through whatever the adventure is and build that confidence back up. But with that, not necessarily the arrogance that led to his little temper tantrum at the end of Time Part 2. That's like, the funny thing is, this wasn't an expectation I had before. This is one I've kind of talked myself into. That's kind of what I would like to see. I don't do this often. I don't generally do the this is what I want to see thing. But as far as an arc for Tennant's character, I would like to see him unsure, gain confidence, but also be accepting that he is not here to stay this time. Yeah. This thing must be doing something right, because it's not theorizing, but I am placing hopes, which I generally don't do, partly because my brain doesn't really work that way most of the time, but also just because, you know, you place expectations on it, you can get let down, but I can't help it. It kind of happened. I am excited. And like, I'm on the record as Tennant being a middling Doctor. Like, he's good, but I've got a lot I prefer over him, but I'm still real excited for this. Dang it, Davies! Got me again. Well, I had a busy and full weekend. I had 2 shows. It was Mother's Day. I finally got to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I had a very full, very packed weekend, which naturally means a new Doctor Who trailer dropped. They are timing this to mess with me. Anyways, it's about 50 some odd seconds long. Let's take a look.
Why did this face come back?
Valid
To say
question.
goodbye.
I don't think that's a plane. It's a spaceship in trouble.
Oh, we got titles. Starbeast. Wild Blue Yonder.
He's here. Driving you mad. Laughing at the human race.
The Giggle. That is the correct reaction. Oh, Donna. I've missed you. So not a ton to go off of. Like, my immediate question is, and we won't know until the specials start airing, is whether or not the bits we saw, like, immediately after each title were actually indicative of that special. Because, with the second one, Wild Blue Yonder, we started seeing Neil Patrick Harris's character. And my immediate question is, okay, does that mean that he's really only in the second one? Is he going to appear across all 3? Heck, does he appear in the first one? Like, is the placement of what clips come after each title, is that indicative of what is in each special? Or is it all just thrown together randomly to get us speculating? Or heck, is it all just from the first special so that we're not even getting a glimpse of what comes later? Who the heck knows? There was something really cool about seeing Tennant look more casual, like without a coat on at all. When he had that line, seeing you laughing at the human race. And like, it looks like almost Casual Friday with this guy. I didn't see the tie. It looked like he didn't have the jacket. I'm like, oh, okay. That was kind of interesting. We saw a little bit more of Beep the Meep. Still can't believe they're freaking doing that. And there isn't a lot to go off of in terms of these titles. Like, these titles could mean freaking anything. And I'm not great at speculation, and so I won't heavily speculate on what these things mean. I will say that Star Beast caught my eye because that was the original working title of the first Alien movie. So I would like that to indicate, like, attempting to go proper space horror with it, alien style horror. I'm not going to assume that that's the case, but I mean, knowing that bit of trivia makes me wonder. A little bit more Donna. We see a little bit of this character who we know is named Rose. She doesn't really get much to do, but like, we see her. Hey, there she is. Cool. But it's not surprising that the big push right now is Tennant and Donna, because they're the ones coming back that everyone knows and everyone loves. Well, maybe not everybody. I know, like, especially together. Like, Donna's one of the best, and Tennant is at his best when paired with her. That's like, these are facts. What are you gonna do? But there isn't that much to say otherwise. There's gonna be a short video. Seeing these trailers makes me smile. Because for as much skepticism as I have been building up about how RTD is going to handle his new era, and I started out with a lot of hope, and I have a little bit less of that as we see the team and all the indications of what he's pulling together. And because what I really want this to be is something new, like to be the approach of him as an artist now, as opposed to trying to recapture what he was doing back when he first revived the show. I don't need more of 2006 Doctor Who. I want to see what he does now, because I do think he's grown and evolved as a writer. I am getting a little bit nervous about that, but I cannot deny that when I see these trailers and when I hear Tennant's voice, and especially with Donna's reaction at the end, I'm smiling. The skepticism can be overridden in the moment when it's fun. And this looks fun.
Okay, you know what? I know it wasn't the exact same suit as he used to be in, but props to David Tennant for still fitting in a suit that skinny, because I can't anymore. Granted, I've had more specific changes to my body than he would have had in the years. Anyways, the Star Beast. First of the Doctor Who specials to mark the 60th anniversary. First experience of any extended length with the 14th Doctor, the return of David Tennant. We have the return of Donna. We have the introduction of a bunch of new characters. We have the integration of a creature that has been known within the deep lore of Doctor Who for some time with the Meep. There's a lot. There's a lot here. I have no idea how long this is going to run, and the review's probably going to be a little bit scattershot. I should also give you a spoiler warning up at the front end. Like, if you haven't seen it, you should. I'll do kind of a brief synopsis at the front end, but then I'm just going to start talking about whatever I decide to do next, and it's probably going to be all over the place. But we have the 14th Doctor show up and immediately runs into Donna. We immediately establish Donna's daughter of Rose, who I like a lot. We'll come back to her. We encounter the husband, Sean, who we have met before but didn't really get to know. I like him a lot. I don't know if I'll remember to bring him up later, so I'm going to say this now. What I really love about Sean is just he's the epitome of, okay, well, let's roll with it.
Something smells nice.
Tuna madras.
I figure that's the kind of person you have to be to have a successful relationship with Donna, and it works. It works really well, and it's just nice to see, especially because so often in the more recent era of Doctor Who since the reboot, relationships that companions have had have often felt interruptive to things. They felt like an intrusion in some way. Not all of them. I actually think better of Danny Pink than most, and they did actually integrate Rory and Amy as a couple, but oftentimes romantic entanglements of the companions feel like, why does this need to be here? And like, you don't get enough of a sense of the relationship to even really get why they're together. Here, no, absolutely. He doesn't get that much screen time, but I get it, and I see why they work. We have the return of Donna's mother, Sylvia. She gets reestablished. Now, of course, the Doctor running into Donna is throwing him off a bit because as we get a full reminder of at the start, so this is very clearly being set up as a jumping on point, it's all presented in a way that feels very, look, here's the bullet points that you need if this is where you're starting. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can go back and check out on a completely different platform if you're in the US, but there's a bunch of other stuff you can check out that'll go into all this, but here's the bullet points, here's what you need, let's go. I think that was a solid way to start. And so we have a crash ship that Donna misses, and I kind of love that they're sticking with that, like that Donna just by quirk of fate misses everything. There's a spaceship burning up on re-entry directly behind her, and she's down here messing with boxes and restacking things. Yeah, like we know that's what her life is like, and I like that it establishes that it kind of continues to be that. So we've got all that, and of course, from an escape pod from that ship, we have the Meep. Now, as I alluded to before, the Meep is actually kind of a deep cut. The Meep originates from comics, I believe, that were in Doctor Who magazine. They originate in some comic form. So that's where both the Meep and the Wrath Warriors that are hunting the Meep all originate from. So my big question going into this was, is this going to canonize the original comic appearance of these figures, or is it going to adapt them? The difference would have been determined by, is the Doctor going to recognize them, or is the Doctor not going to know what the deal with the Wrath Warriors and the Meep is initially? It was the latter, which means this is adapting the comic works rather than continuing directly on from them, which is probably the safer thing to do, because you can get away with canonizing Big Finish. Canonizing the comics is probably a lot messier. So just choosing to adapt it, that was probably a good call. I mean, the general relationship Doctor Who, since its revival, has had with the extraneous media, be it Big Finish, be it comics, be it novels, is basically, if it doesn't contradict what's in the show, you can consider it canon, but we reserve the right to contradict it or adapt it for the first time for the show at a later date. I mean, they did it with this. They did it with the Big Finish audio Jubilee, which created Dalek back in Series 1. They did it with Paul Cornell's book, which was the basis for Human Nature and Family of Blood, which was initially a novel about the Seventh Doctor, but regardless, it's kind of nice seeing them pull from those sources again, because that was largely something done during RTD's initial era. Russell T Davies, who's running the show and ran it during the initial revival and is now doing so again. So it's kind of nice to have that assurance that like he's willing to dip into these sources again. When Stephen Moffat ran the show, he didn't really seem to do that too much, at least not to my memory. Nothing that stood out heavily at any rate. And Chibnall didn't seem to do it at all. Now, it's not automatically a good thing, but it was something that I didn't necessarily expect to ever come back. And I kind of like that it has here. So we have the Meep. The Meep pleads to Rose. This whole thing of like, oh, they're after the Meep. And, being all cute and snuggly. And Suddenly we have possessed unit soldiers who appear to be after the Meep, but also the Wrath Warriors are after the Meep, and eventually the reveal being the Meep is a vicious dictatorial monster who has possessed a whole bunch of unit soldiers. So we get that twist, which I knew was coming because I knew enough about the Meep to know that was going to happen. But I imagine it was probably kind of fun for folks who didn't know. I mean, I can't speak from the position of not knowing. I imagine a decent number of them would have guessed at some point, but I feel like it's paced and built well. And then it's just a matter of dealing with the Meep before the Meep gets into the rocket that it came in, and that thing has a takeoff mechanism that will basically destroy all of London in order to power itself back up into space, which, yeah, okay, that's a legit threat. And Donna's getting dragged along through this. Rose is getting dragged along through a chunk of this, and there's the concern about Donna remembering because of what happened to her back with the ending of Series 4, that she'd had the consciousness of a Time Lord poured into her, and if she remembers, that's too much for one person. It's going to basically burn her from the inside out. And so we've got all these things, and here's our adventure. I like the tone. I like the tone on this thing a lot. It is light enough, but it does hit proper emotional moments and weights, especially around the Doctor and Donna, and just, well, the Doctor in general, just re-encountering these people and having these moments. And like, so there's a moment referencing Wilf, who doesn't appear in this episode. I'm kind of expecting to show up in the next one. The late Bernard Cribbins did shoot, I believe, everything that they needed from him before he passed away, but we'll see if they do actually include it. But I do enjoy just the references that it turns out he's basically in accommodated housing provided by Unit.
She's looking after Wilf. Brilliant. Brilliant.
I love the idea that Unit is just going to take care of him. Because, I mean, like, old soldier, yes, veteran. But beyond that, like, for what he did for the Doctor, like, yeah. No, we'll take, guy's 95, we'll take care of him, don't worry. I just like that. I like the Doctor's reaction to it. Actually, let me back up. I had kind of briefly mentioned that my thoughts on this version of the opening credit theme was like, it's very Series 4 version. It wasn't really anything new, which in and of itself is fine, but how well it was going to work for me was going to kind of depend on the visuals that went along with it. This is great. This feels more open. It feels grander. It feels like more of a spectacle. It looks more wondrous. And if you're going to go with something with definitive visuals, as opposed to, say, what happened during Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker's era, which was more abstract, which I did also really like. But if you're not going to go abstract and you're going to go with definitive visuals, I love the grandeur and the splendor of this. And they've tried to integrate, like, the sense of the greater universe in some of these opening titles before. They did it towards the end of Matt Smith's era, and it didn't quite click for me then, but it really does now. I love these opening credits. I'll be curious to see if they keep them or if they alter them when we get the switch to Shudigatwa. And I'll say right now, I'm going to wonder whether that's also going to be the case for the sonic screwdriver and for the TARDIS interior. I'm assuming not the TARDIS interior, because that would be a big expense to only use for 3 specials and then completely redesign, but I'll come back to the TARDIS interior. But since I brought it up, why don't we talk about the sonic screwdriver? I like the new uses we see for this, and I say that as someone who has felt in the past that the Sonic kind of became too all-purpose. I felt that especially during Eleven's tenure when it was Matt Smith, but one of the things I really liked about Christopher Eccleston and the original David Tennant run was that it felt like it had a number of very specific functions, a pretty high number of specific ones, and this feels a little bit more like that. But even though we're getting this whole new thing where like it can kind of draw things like it's a map or it's a shield, that could have been overpowered. That could have been like, oh great, there's a massively useful utility function for this thing. But the thing is, like, it takes him a while to do it, so it can't be thrown up quickly. And I think that's a good way to nerf what would otherwise be too useful an ability for him to just have in his pocket. So I think it's, and like really the only reason it works here is because the possessed unit soldiers and the Wrath Warriors are too busy shooting at each other to focus on the Doctor and the Noble family. So that works for me, because while I think the function in and of itself, like, that's kind of too useful and too all-purpose for the Doctor to have, but he can't throw it up quickly. So I think that is going to be a good explanation for why, hopefully, we don't see him abuse this as a function of the screwdriver in future. So that's the kind of thing I like from it. Like, I did appreciate during Jodie Whittaker's era that it was primarily used just as a scanner. I liked paring it back down to that. You know, it just sometimes opened doors and it mainly scanned stuff. I did like that simplifying, but if we're going to add more functions to it, especially if they seem super useful, I think it's a good idea to give it a downside, and having it take a while to draw this thing in the air, that's a suitable downside. You know, it's balancing your mechanics. So one character in the game isn't completely OP, and I decided to go with video game terms there for a second. I don't know why. We're going to move on. I'm going to reiterate right now that I would have really liked if they had David Tennant use his natural Scottish accent in this form as the Doctor, because one of the concerns that I've had about this Doctor is that it is just going to feel like the 10th Doctor again. And it's not going to feel like its own distinct entity that has to figure out why it looks like an older one. But this really does just feel like him. And from a nostalgia standpoint, that's not the worst thing in the world, but from a storytelling and like mapping the overall journey of the Doctor and the way that they're different, like, it's disappointing. I was really kind of hoping for more to distinguish him and make it clear how he's different other than just the experiences he's had since the last time he had this face. And right now, so far at least, this mostly feels like the only difference is the stuff he's been through. Personality-wise, seems pretty much like the same guy, which dynamic-wise, in terms of bouncing off of Dawn and slipping back into that dynamic, yeah, I do get why they went that way. They didn't want to alter a beloved dynamic between Doctor and companion. So I do kind of get it, but I still find it a little bit disappointing there. Okay, something else I need to address. So we have a sort of a higher up in unit who appears in this, who is a wheelchair user. I do like her. I actually especially like that early on, they have this whole thing where like the soldiers are going to check out the upper portion of this rocket, and they have to go up these stairs, and one of them just looks at her and goes, oh, sorry. And her response is just like, don't wait for me, go, do your job, which is perfect.
Sorry about the stairs, but Geneva says to go in immediately.
Don't make me the problem, just get in there.
And also, it becomes a narrative necessity that she not be up there with the rest of them because they all get possessed and she doesn't. So the other thing I need to address in regards to this is if you saw my earlier video about the whole thing with Davros and what was done with him and the Children in Need Special, one of the things I mentioned there is my preference to the kind of alteration that RTD may have done with Davros. Again, I did a whole video on it, but short version being like Davros is a character traditionally heavily scarred and in a mobility aid. And for the purposes of that short, he was neither. Now, depending on how it's done moving forward, that can be treated as like a one-off thing, or it could be how he is depicted going forward. There's wiggle room for both to happen. But one of the things I mentioned when I talked about that was my preference to trying to just fix a problematic trope, the problematic trope being evil people with clear visible disabilities. And I don't have the time to parse all of that. Again, I did a whole video on disability representation, so if you're confused as to that, go check out that video. I don't eat up my comments with that question here as to why that's a problem. Just understand it's a thing. So my preference to just altering a character more often than not is to provide counterexamples, which this does. And what I'm hoping that means is that RTD or anyone else won't feel the need for the unscarred and bipedal version of Davros to be the new default because we can't lean into the trope we were trying to avoid. I'm hoping that the presence of a counterexample like this woman who's kind of heading up the unit group, I'm hoping that that's what they'll lean into more, because this is exactly what I said is the better way to do it. Provide counterexamples so that the only people using mobility aids aren't all monsters. So it was nice to see her, but even beyond that, I'm sure some people have and will cry, oh, it's just forced diversity and it's woke and it's blah, 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 blah. Like, I haven't watched any of the people who are going to say that. I know they are, though. And there's other stuff, particularly around Rose. I'm sure they're going to freak out. I don't need to see it. I know what they say. They always say the same stuff. We'll get to Rose. But I think she's just a good character. And I think she's well utilized. And I think her disability is integrated interestingly and into both the character and the narrative. Like, she doesn't make a big deal out of it. The soldier kind of makes a bigger deal out of it than she does. And being in unit, she's built utility into this thing. That makes perfect sense to me. I like her. I hope she shows up again. I'm a little bit torn later on with sort of how the Meeps plan gets undone in reverse, because like there's these cracks forming, and like first of all we have the highly convenient thing that all these cracks appear to be branching out and going down the streets and obeying that, so we're not seeing houses split in half. And then when the whole thing's reversed, not only is there no longer this fiery doom coming up from these cracks, the cracks actually close themselves. It feels a little clean. It feels a little just, okay, why'd you have it be that much damage in the first place if you're just going to undo it immediately, which is something RTD has done a couple times. But that having been said, I will kind of take it as a little bit of palate cleanser from the fact that Chibnall during the Jodie Whittaker era had a tendency to just cause a lot of damage and not deal with it. So like, if you're not going to deal with it, I suppose reversing it is better than just forgetting that you destroyed a huge chunk of the universe and never addressing it again, which is what Chibnall did. So it didn't bother me as much as it might have. I think only because we were coming off the back of the era of an era that handled collateral damage and destruction from the villains worse than this. So I don't love it, but it is better. So let's talk about Rose. First of all, Rose is a trans character played by a trans actor. Good. That's the baseline. Thank you. So already off to a solid start. The ways in which it is established that she is trans, I am 50-50 on. There is one scene that I think is handled beautifully, and there's one that I'm like, I'd rather you hadn't done that. And it's not, again, not the worst thing in the world, but like, I don't know if RTD consulted any trans people to like do a pass on the script, but here's the note I would have given if I had been asked for my input specifically on this aspect. I love how absolutely dead set supportive Rose's entire family is. The scene that I mentioned that I think is handled incredibly well that establishes Rose as trans is with Donna's mother, because Donna's mother, not in Rose's presence, but once Rose is gone, is like second guessing her interactions, using a term like gorgeous. Is that too stereotypically feminine? Am I reinforcing stereotypes? Is that what she wants to hear? And like that uncertainty, I think especially from somebody of her generation, I've seen like she wants to do it right, but she has a lot of self-confidence issues about whether or not she is doing it right. And I think that scene rang very true for especially older members, older generations who want to be supportive but feel awkward about it. I thought that was very well done.
I just get so clumsy. I know. So do I.
The scene leading into it with the boys on the street yelling at Rose, I don't think it was wrong to include them yelling, because that is regrettably also true to the trans experience in both the US and the UK. Just a lot of harassment and a lot of nonsense. I really would have preferred that they hadn't yelled Rose's birth name. I'm not going to say dead name because we don't know for certain if she considers it that. Like, for example, I go by Vera. My birth name is Nathaniel. I don't consider it a dead name. I do still use it in some situations, and it doesn't make me dysphoric. The dead name specifically means you're dysphoric about it and you don't want to hear it anymore. It seems like Rose probably leans closer to dead name, but we don't know for sure, so I'm just opting to call it birth name. I really would have rathered, though, that we hadn't heard, like, they could have yelled, hey, dude, nice dress, or, oh, bro, cool makeup, like, because, to be honest, that's the kind of stuff I get in my comments by the dozens, literally every morning. Every morning I come on here and I have to spend the first 15 minutes or so of my day clearing out those comments. So like you could go, oh, it's generic and unoriginal. Yeah, so are transphobes. So you want to be accurate to the experience, that works. Now, Would kids who are trying to be transphobic, who know her birth name, would they have yelled at her? Yes, but the reason I would rather it wasn't there is I don't like giving ammunition to jerk viewers who are now going to dead name the character just to be jackasses. Like, they were going to misgender her regardless, but now they also have a name to stick to it. And that's ammunition you didn't need to give them. And I say ammunition as if it actually matters. Like, in my view, the opinions of such people don't matter. They legitimately do not. But I still think that was unnecessary. I've had similar thoughts in other cases. Like, there was a comic I read a couple years ago that had a non-binary character, and I really liked that. But what bugged me was that at one point in the story, it was confirmed what that character's gender assigned at birth was. And that was really disappointing because, especially in the comic book medium where you don't have a voice to cue off of and it's just an artistic rendering, they really had the opportunity to have a non-binary character that that any jerk audience members couldn't accurately misgender because they don't know what the character's gender assigned at birth was. And because it's just an artistic rendering, you can't be sure. The character was fairly androgynous. And it just bummed me out that they kind of lost that ability to lean into that. And I kind of have similar feelings here. Like, it's not wrong that we found out what her birth name was, but it also wasn't necessary, and I would kind of rather it wasn't there. I've spent longer on this point than I wanted to, but it was one of those things that kind of required explanation. So don't take the amount of time I've spent talking about this to be reflective of how deeply I feel about it. I actually don't think it's that big a deal. It's just a small note. That's actually kind of the sort of thing that's going to happen a bit with Rose. I have a lot of opinions on trans representation. Shock of shocks. So I might linger on some of this more than it is actually reflective of how prominent these feelings are for me in regards to the thing overall. But just in general, the supportive family, the way she's portrayed, the other, the younger kid from the block who's just, calling her Rose and getting all excited. It was great. I'll be curious to see if they bring that boy back because he gets a little bit more prominence than I think was required for his use here, which seemed to primarily be just have a character we recognize reacting to the cracks coming down the street and whatnot. That might be all we get from him, but who knows? We'll see. So, the Dr. Donna. The Doctor unlocking this aspect of Donna. First of all, I like that it has already started leaking through. Like, her running back to help him is because that instinct is still there. Like, it's buried. She can't remember most of it, but it leaks out little bits. And I love that the first thing she does when he unlocks all her memories is get mad at him for the lingering sense of the Doctor's moral compass that was stuck in her, that was still there, gave her the impulse to give away all the lottery money. I love that her first reaction is to be pissed at him for that.
I gave it away to be like you, so I could be kind, so I could be nice, so I could be helpful.
That's very Donna, because like, while the giving it all away, like, it gave me a warm feeling. There was part of me that like, would she though? And this basically establishes like, no, she wouldn't. Fully within her own faculties and not influenced by this background aspect of the Doctor that was in her head. No, she wouldn't have. And she knows that. And she's ticked.
166 million pounds.
Yes, Donna, but destruction of London?
Oh, I'll show you destruction, mate.
That was really good. And just, I get why the Dr. Donna kind of can't be a long-term continuing thing, because that basically gives us two active doctors and one that's permanently on Earth. Why would the Doctor ever have to come back to save Earth again if the Dr. Donna's right here? Like, I get why she can't stay that way, but I do still really enjoy when she is the Dr. Donna and bouncing off of Tennant. Like, so rapid fire. It's so much fun. I feel good about half of the solution so that Donna does not die. And I was fairly confident she wasn't going to die because there's more specials, and I've seen like behind the scenes footage that seem to indicate some scenes that have not been shown in this yet. But I got genuinely nervous and I got choked up seeing that she might. That felt like a genuine threat. And when she didn't, and we get the reveal of Rose, that basically divided the meta crisis so that it was not as severe, but it was carried in both of them. I actually really like that as a solution. I think that's quite clever. And it's something that I wouldn't have thought of. Obviously, the Doctor didn't think of it. He realizes what's happened, but I like that. I think that's clever. And also giving Rose this wonderful, affirming, shining moment that, you know, she is different. Not just for being trans, but for everything that her mother passed on to her. She's different. She's special. Like Donna is, even though Donna didn't think she was special for so long. And I like that. We then have the further and also some of the specific lines that feel slightly muddled. So like there's the non-binary thing.
We're binary.
She's not, because the Doctor's male and female.
And neither. And more.
And again, one of two things happened here. Either RTD miscommunicated something or doesn't fully understand non-binary. And I don't want to accuse him of one or the other, but here's the reason, like that line, I don't have an inherent problem with it. And actually, especially as a callback to Donna's whole binary thing from the end of series 4, like
Binary. Non-binary. Binary.
I get the impulse to do something with that when you have a trans character. But the thing is, everything about Rose's depiction indicated her as being a binary trans woman. And what I mean by that is the gender binary, if you aren't familiar with this concept, is man, woman. Now, non-binary is everything either in between or separate from. So people whose sense of gender does not firmly hit one or the other. And again, this could be a whole other topic. I'm not going to get into it right now, but like, no, it's not just about wanting to wear gender neutral clothes or wanting to be butch if you're a woman. Like, it is about an actual sense of self. So I need you to roll with that. But non-binary is a thing. It is people who fall somewhere in the middle. Gender fluid, which is what I am, is a form of non-binary because yes, sometimes I do feel very, very femme. Other times it's somewhere in the middle and it meanders. My sense of self does not stay put. Then there's also agender, people who feel like I hardly know her. I don't think I have one. And so like there's multiple forms of non-binary, but the thing is, Rose, as shown here, really appears to be a binary trans woman, moving from one part of the gender binary, which again, gender is not actually a binary, just go with the terminology here, moving from one part of the binary from assigned gender at birth of man to woman. That is a binary transition. So she's not non-binary, at least as you depicted her here. If she is non-binary, you did not establish that. And I think one quick line that could have, if that was the intention, I don't know if it was, but if it was, one quick line that could have covered for that would have been when Sylvia, Donna's mother, was kind of flubbing a little bit, maybe with the pronouns or the name. Donna could have said, you know, it's also okay to call her they if that's better for you. And Sylvia could have been like, no, that's even more confusing because I'm used to that being plural. And again, not to make a joke out of it, but just to acknowledge why it's difficult for her. I think that could have been the chance to easily and quickly establish that she is a non-binary trans person. But you didn't establish that. So the non-binary line sticks out as misapplied, I think. Again, I can't be certain of what his actual intent was, but as depicted, it's not quite landing right. But there's that. Oh, I do want to say this. I'm impressed with the fact that RTD managed to put in a "did you just assume pronouns" joke, and it actually worked. Because that joke pretty much never works. It's largely done by the right to make fun of trans people. Oh, did I assume your pronouns? But even when I've heard people who are trans themselves or are trying to be supportive of trans people make a version of that joke, it always comes off really bad to me. This one I actually think worked. I think that actually worked as a joke because not only did Rose be like, did you just assume pronouns? But the doctor's reaction wasn't to roll his eyes and be like, it was like, oh no, that's a good point.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes. Sorry. Good point. Are you he or she or they?
And I also like that the meep just says the meep. The meep only has proper noun. There are no pronouns for the meep.
My chosen pronoun is the definite article. I am always the meep.
Oh, I do that.
Which also makes it a valid observation from Rose because it actually applied to how the meep talks about the meep and how the meep wants other people to talk about the meep. You could argue it's a neo-pronoun. I think it's just proper noun across the board. Doesn't make use of pronouns. But I was impressed. RTD made that joke actually work and function. So props to that. The one other thing, coming back not only to Rose, but also to Rose and Donna, the dispersing of the sort of Time Lord essence, the idea of just letting it go. That really seems too easy. And the lines associated with it also feel not fully thought through. And again, I'm sure these are some lines that certain kinds of pundits are losing their freaking minds over. But, you know, the lines about...
We've got all that power, but there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
I guess I'm just kind of like... I don't think that has anything to do with anything. And again, if there was a specific intent behind a line like that, it's not well communicated. I think the impression is that just the way that the Doctor, particularly when the Doctor is a man, tends to think is a little bit too rigid to have the sort of mental mobility to come up with a slightly more out-of-the-box solution, which, to be fair, Donna also didn't come up with on her own. Because Donna, when she first became the Dr. Donna in Series 4, it's not like she suggested it. It's not like she knew that this was a possibility either. So it feels like it's meant to be like the additional understanding of you aren't stuck as one thing and you can just change who you are to become something that is healthy for you if what you are currently is not. That understanding from Rose added to this sort of split of the Dr. Donna, that might be what gives the idea of like, we can just let it go. Kind of like how Rose would have had to just let go of whatever masculinity she felt burdened by. I think that might have been the idea, or at least that's the mental work that I'm doing to come up with a version of this interaction that fully clicks. Because when it happened, I was kind of like, wait, what? And I think that's just the dialogue back and forth might have needed some fine tuning and might have needed another pass just for clarity, because it seems written for more punchy lines, but the punchier lines aren't communicating the idea, assuming I'm even right about what the idea is. If the idea was meant to be something else altogether, then it really needed some clarification, because even my attempt to sort of headcanon what it is that's going on, if even that is wrong, then okay, I really don't know what you were doing, and that needed to be more properly communicated. I'm not gonna like go off on a whole thing and like, making it all this gender stuff. Like, I do think there is a way that tying it to a trans understanding of existence, that like you don't have to hold on to this stuff, you can just let it go. I think there is a way to make that idea work. It just isn't quite pulled off here. But it didn't weigh me down to the point that I'm like, oh, God. I wasn't rolling my eyes. I was just slightly confused. And again, I feel like if there wasn't, and maybe there was, I don't know, but if there wasn't a trans person consulted for these specific aspects of the story, that maybe there should have been. Maybe there was. I don't know. But overall, I think the finding a way to give Donna her memories back, but also remove the fact that it was going to kill her, was nice to see. Like, I have said in the past that there was a beautiful tragedy to her exit in Series 4, and I stand by that. But I'm also now at an age where I'm like, okay, tragedy can have beauty to it, but could we have more happy endings, please? And this gives me that, and I'm happy for it. I'm a little bit annoyed that Rose was not allowed to go in the TARDIS. I suspect the reason is just like the adventure for the next episode is meant to just be the Doctor and Donna, but like, I'm a little annoyed. Like, you could have at least let her in to see the thing, even if you were then going to shoo her out before the whole thing with the coffee, which I did laugh. I did legitimately crack. Like, that's a cheap joke, but dang it, it worked. So the TARDIS interior took me a little bit to get used to, because I've seen the TARDIS this white before, back in classic era Doctor Who, but when it's been this white, that room, the control room, was smaller significantly. So seeing it that expansive and that white made it feel kind of empty in a way that I'm not sure I love. Like, the TARDIS interior has been this big before. The TARDIS interior for Eccleston and Tennant's first run was a bit cramped. And that worked, that was fine. But it felt bigger with Matt Smith, his initial design, but it was just loaded with quirky stuff. And then it had the redesign, and when it was Smith in there, it was okay. But then when Peter Capaldi's Doctor was in there were like bookshelves and a bust of Beethoven and a chalkboard, and like, there was stuff in it. It didn't feel empty. And then the 13th Doctor's TARDIS interior was just so busy, I never really had a solid sense of how big the thing even was, to be completely honest. But this right now, as presented, like, we're getting a good look at it. I'm hoping there will be stuff in it, because it just feels kind of empty. That having been said, I like that the round things light up in colors. That's a cool touch. I dig that. And that did help. Once I saw that, I'm like, oh, okay, so it won't be all white all the time. We can get, some mood lighting, basically, for lack of a better way to put it in here. And I'm down for that. It's, for how big it is, it feels kind of empty. That said, seeing David Tennant run around in it was both thrilling and exhausting. I'm watching him going, oh, I would lose my breath so quickly trying to run that excitedly around there. Oh, I'm old now. Here we are. Couple of quick things. I like that the two Wrath Warriors who die get acknowledged. They get named, and then they get recognized again at the end.
Sergeant Zogroth and Constable Zreeg gave their lives.
Because RTD did have a problem with treating the loss of non-human life kind of flippantly during his initial run. He didn't do it all the time, but it happened sometimes, and I like that it doesn't happen here. Also, random question, was anyone else's sound mix like a little bit off? I had to turn the subtitles on. The dialogue got drowned out sometimes. Was that just me? Let me know. I think I've touched on everything in terms of the specifics. So broad thoughts, this was fun. This had the energy that I wanted RTD to bring back. This is a bit nostalgic, but while I've said I really hope that RTD doesn't just try and bring back, try and recapture the glory days of his original run and does some new things and new ideas and new directions with the show overall, I am prepared to kind of table that until Ncuti Gatwa takes over the role, because bringing Tennant back, it's going to be more nostalgic. It's going to deliberately feel more like the old stuff. So I'm okay with it here that this is more evocative of his older era, but it feels appropriate for anniversary specials, something that is meant to be celebratory, something that is bringing back an old Doctor, bringing back an old companion, an old dynamic. Like, okay, I will let the nostalgia sweep me up here. When we get to Ncuti Gatwa, please give me something newer than this. But for right now, this is nice. This is comfort viewing. This is a warm hug of an episode, and yeah, I like it. It'd be an overstatement for me to say that I love it, but I do like it, and I'll be curious to see what the next one brings, because my suspicion is that this one is meant to be, the warm reintroduction, and things are going to get a bit darker next time. We'll see. But those are my thoughts on the Star Beast. It's a good time. Couple of notes on some of the specifics, but overall, yeah, this had an energy that I was happy to exist in for an hour. Off we go into the wild blue yonder. Wild Blue Yonder, second of the Doctor Who specials, and the second to feature David Tennant as the 14th Doctor, Catherine Tate returning as Donna Noble, and Russell T. Davies at the helm of the show. Oh boy. Okay. Let me say this up front. This is the kind of thing that gets me genuinely excited for more Doctor Who. The previous episode, which I did like the Star Beast for the most part. I had nitpicks, but I have nitpicks about everything, including about this. We'll get there. But swimming in nostalgia is the best way I could describe the appeal of the previous one, of the Star Beast. This gets me excited for the things Doctor Who might do different. And this feels like a really good second entry, because that first one, yeah, swimming in nostalgia, brought back lots of good feelings, but also made me nervous that it was largely just gonna feel like Russell T. Davies was trying to do what he did, 10 to 15 years ago. And I'm like, I want something that feels a little bolder than that. And so I get this. I'm like, okay, there. That's what I'm talking about. I like this a lot. There's great atmosphere, phenomenal performances, a terrific sense of isolation. I'm going to end up comparing this to the episode Midnight from Series 4 a fair bit, and I think that's a fair thing to do, given that both are written by Russell T. Davies. But overall, the impressions are very, very positive. I am going to have nitpicks. I will bring up some stuff. But let's get the most glaring problem out of the way. I hate this cold open. I really hate it. I hate the jokey tone. It's doing the, oh, look, the Doctor and Donna run into a famous person thing that, I wish Doctor Who would stop doing. Granted, I appreciate that it wasn't the bulk of the episode. It was done as a joke. But even as a joke, just stop. I don't want any more of this, and it has nothing to do with anything else. I'd actually say it interrupts the sense of danger. Okay, you got on top of the fire in the TARDIS long enough to crack jokes about Isaac Newton and set up the idea that from now on, the show's going to call it Mavity instead of Gravity. Mavity. That'll probably get amended next episode because we'll, correct timelines or something. But regardless, why is this here? It exists for no reason other than to have a cold open. You don't always need a cold open. Drop the cold open. Just start with the credits. That would have been fine. There's literally one thing I like about this, and that is Donna pointing out, do you just have this thing set to famous people, which normally that kind of lampshade hanging might annoy me because I'm like, yeah, I know I don't like that. And I know the show knows it's not great because they just made a joke out of it, except putting it in the mouth of a character like Donna and having Catherine Tate deliver it. Yeah, I actually did laugh at that, and that was fine. I also okay, I'm going to point this out just because I don't care, but it's going to annoy me regardless because it doesn't matter if I care. Isaac Newton, they cast somebody non-white. Fine. I super don't care. However, I know that nonsense is going to be blaring at me in the online discourse of this frickin' thing. And no, I'm not going to talk about it because I don't care. I don't. So if you have strong feelings about this, go ahead and have them somewhere else. Please. Okay. Now I can actually talk about the episode proper. As I said, I like this pretty much right off the bat. I love just the sense of scale. I love when they're just out in that corridor and just how far everything's stretched. I love just this dark figure far in the distance. Can't tell what it is. Can't even tell if it's moving. I mean, eventually we get to it later. It turns out it wasn't, but it was is it just walking at a calm pace? And that's why, because there's just so much distance to cross? You don't know. Wonderful sense of isolation. And then you get up to the cockpit, still nothing. Well, there's space, but if that's space, where are the stars? What are the words we're hearing? Why is this ship reconfiguring? And the sense of isolation, of loneliness. And it hammers that really well. Donna feels the weight and the idea that they don't know how they're going to get back. Oh, let's back up. The TARDIS running away, in and of itself, fine. The fact that the Doctor stuck the sonic screwdriver in it, no TARDIS, no Sonic. Oh, see, now, like, I am somebody who, by and large, defends the use of the Sonic most of the time. There are some people who are like, it solves too many problems. Yet, generally, as a rule, it solves problems that would be uninteresting to take the time to fix. That's why it's used on doors and as scanning so much. Because most of the time, it would not be interesting to watch the Doctor pick a door lock, nor would it be particularly interesting to watch the Doctor figure out, what this is. We just need the information to keep the story moving. Just have it and get it off the Sonic. I'm fine with that, by and large. But this shows that sometimes, strip him of his tools. Take it away. And I don't think this is an argument for getting rid of the Sonic as a general thing, but it does show that, like, sometimes, having the Sonic would have hurt this story. Cool. So he doesn't have it. Not this time. Love that. Love that. But as I said, the sense of size, scale, the enormity of space is conveyed really well. The idea that they're not in some pocket dimension, they're not separate from the universe. They're at the edge of the universe, meaning they are so far away from where everything is that no light has yet reached this point. That's existentially terrifying. And we've seen companions like have these moments of, what if I can't get home again? Donna you really feel like she thinks she's not gonna get back. And she sells just the weight of that hitting her. She sells that really well. And then the way the not things are introduced in a way that initially just made me go, wait, are we doing nonlinear storytelling? Are we just messing with time a little bit here? Having the Doctor show up and start talking to Donna, having Donna show up in the room and start talking to the Doctor. And realizing, and as I said, my first instinct was like time dilation or just like funky editing. No, there's something else going on here. And just feeling that sink in, but also not just using it as a moment to be a bit creepy, which it is, effectively so, but also just using it as a moment to characterize both the Doctor and Donna and contrast them. Because both of them do the same thing, but it illustrates how these things are different for them. Because for Donna, she thinks, what's my family going to do if I never go back? She crafts this story about how Rose will come back every year, Sean will come back every day, and just lays that out. Meanwhile, the Doctor says, well, what'll happen to the TARDIS? It'll just land somewhere and just stay there forever. That's what he has left. I mean, like, he has Donna, but in terms of, like, the permanence of a sense of family, what he has is the TARDIS. So they do the same thing. Her for her family, him just for the TARDIS. I love that contrast. And I love that the introduction of these not things is done this smoothly, this creepily, and in a way that is not just, hey, creepy thing going on. Let's characterize and give you good moments with the Doctor and with Donna. So I'm going to pause another minute here. At this point, I am giving up on the idea that the 14th Doctor is going to be very distinguishable from the 10th. It's very clear they're not doing that. And yes, I have now at this point actually seen some bits from an interview or something of that nature where they both, David Tennant and Russell T Davies, kind of acknowledge that.
Will people notice any differences? There wouldn't be any point in me coming back to then play it completely differently, I don't think.
No.
That'd be a little bit
big disappointment.
We like familiarity.
Okay. Yeah.
While I will always, I think, consider it a missed opportunity that they didn't do something different, like have a lot of aspects of the 10th Doctor, but have it be more distinguishable, I'm always going to feel that's a missed opportunity. That being said, here's something I really appreciate about these specials. If you're not going to alter the characterization, then the least you could do is present stories in which they are actually going to benefit from leaning on the established characterization and the established dynamics between him and Donna. And the last episode already did it because it allows them to click back into place pretty much immediately. This one hinges heavily on that dynamic as they interact with each other and with the not things and have to figure out who is who and what is what. Yeah, actually, this is a story that couldn't necessarily be told at all if you were going to have the 14th Doctor be more distinctly different from the 10th. I mean, you could, but I think this is a story that functions better having him just slip back into that old persona a bit more. I'm not going to stop thinking of it as a missed opportunity, but I do at least appreciate that if this is what we're doing, that the stories being told, this one especially, benefit from the fact that he's not being done differently. Good. That means that you didn't have him just act like the 10th Doctor strictly out of nostalgia or creative laziness. You did it, well, maybe you did it just because you're like, that's how we're going to do it. But then you either had stories that you realized he'd benefit best by acting like the 10th Doctor, or you took the fact that he's basically just the 10th Doctor again and crafted stories that do the most with that. Either way, whatever order it happened in, good. Good. Because, like, I can accept sometimes creative decisions being made that aren't what I would prefer if something comes out of it. If something comes out of it that is a good story, a good character development, something that either couldn't be done if you didn't make that creative choice, I'd prefer you didn't, or it works better with that creative choice in place, I'm going to be more accepting, even if my personal preference would still be that you hadn't made that specific creative choice. Because at the very least, it wasn't for no reason. You benefited from it. You built something off that choice. Good. So that was good to see. Now, the point at which I kind of paused to talk about that was before I was going to have to start talking about the special effects. Okay, so here's the thing. I think that the points at which the effects take over with the not things are some of the weakest points, both visually and in terms of the story, because when they're just there, just looking mostly, if not entirely, like the Doctor and Donna, then there's this sense of unease, this sense of you don't know what they're gonna do. But then a jaw unhinges, or the arms are too long, or they grow to this massive freaking size, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's what we're doing. The tension out of, I don't know what you're gonna do, is gone. In addition to the fact that the CGI and the effects aren't great. The thing is, I'm not sure that these moments would work, for me at least, any better if the effects were seamless. I think the only one that really worked for me, well, no, there were two. The very first stuff with the arms being too long, that kind of worked. And when Donna had two knees in her leg, that worked for me. Three, I suppose. The copy of the Doctor dropping on all fours to run faster. That was good. So, like, out of all the stuff that they do, you know, the jaw drop, the getting real big, the melting into a puddle, the backward bend, and he's literally talking out of his own rear end, like, even if the CGI was seamless, I think I'd have the same feelings about most of these moments. I think they're too much. They're showing too much, and I think less would have been more. And this is where I'm going to start comparing it to Midnight. So Midnight was a Series 4 episode that was just the Doctor. Donna was in the episode technically in the beginning and at the end, but she wasn't present. It was just the Doctor on this tour bus with some other people dealing with this thing where no one knew what it was doing or why. And I've always just referred to it as the Midnight Entity. And we learn almost nothing about that thing. We see how it operates. We don't know what it's trying to accomplish. We don't know where it came from. We don't know what its goals are. We just know how it's operating. And it's a masterpiece.
Shamble, bobble, dibble, dooble.
This, I think, sort of demonstrates why giving us more information about something like the Midnight Entity would not make the story any better. Because I think, honestly, we learn a little more about these things and we see a little too much about the specifics of what they're capable of, at least in terms of like the morphing and whatnot, that it actually demystifies them slightly. Not completely. Like, they're still in that ballpark, but I can't help but make that comparison, and I kind of wish we saw a little less of their capabilities and knew a little less about them than we do. That is admittedly a bit of a nitpick. If Midnight as an episode did not exist, I probably would be less critical of this particular aspect. But that episode does exist, and it's written by the same person. So I think the comparison is fair. And I do want to emphasize, I think the performances from both David Tennant and Catherine Tate in this are great, as both have. Like, I love that this is a two-hander. For all intents and purposes, there's only 2 actors, 4 characters in this, and it's really well done. And I love that they find very organic ways, like due to the fact that the ship keeps shifting to split the Doctor and Donna up, so they have to go through the routine again like, crap. I don't know if you're you. And I really loved it the first time when they got, not deliberately, but after they realized there are copies of each other and they got split up, first time they have to try and figure out, I love the completely different tones in the scenes between Donna and the copy of the Doctor and the Doctor and the copy of Donna. And yes, I will get to some of the specifics of what was said there. Give me a second. Let me appreciate the tone first. I love that for the one with Donna, the real Donna, it's snappier, it's funnier, it's wittier, it's more fast-paced.
Hi, it's me. No, hold on, that was my guy.
And then with the Doctor, the real Doctor, it's more melancholy, it's more somber.
You're saying this to break me down.
And they're both doing the same thing. They're both trying to suss out the other person that they're in the room with. But the tones are almost night and day. And that should conflict. But it doesn't. Because that's kind of the duality of not only these characters, but of these characters together. They are that fast-paced. They do bounce off of each other that quick. They are that rapid fire. They are that funny. But they're also that serious. They're also that emotional. They're also that hit you right in the heart. And to set up something like this, to explore and give us tastes of both sides of these characters and their dynamic at the same time in parallel scenes cutting between them? Mwah! Love it. And yes, this does give us confirmation, and this is basically about what I expected, because Russell T Davies had mentioned before that he has no intention of retconning The Timeless Child, and there was going to be a small acknowledgement of it. And that is here with the side of the scene that's between the actual Doctor and the copy of Donna, with the acknowledgement that the Doctor is not from Gallifrey and he doesn't know where he comes from.
You don't know where you're from.
And for me, this is actually the more important part. That half the universe was destroyed and it wasn't restored.
The flux.
It destroyed half the universe because of me.
Thank you. If you're new around here for any reason, one of my many problems with Flux is that it really did seem like a huge swath of the universe was destroyed in that story, and it wasn't restored. That in and of itself wasn't the problem, but nobody ever acknowledged it. That they lost half the universe. They just jaunt off on their next adventure. The Doctor didn't acknowledge it. Yaz didn't. Dan didn't. Nobody said anything. We get an acknowledgement, and it's tearing him up that half the universe is gone and he didn't save it. Good!
We stand here now, on the edge of creation, a creation which I devastated.
It should, but also I love that this Donna, even though she's a copy, she says what Donna would have said, which is that it's not your fault.
It wasn't your fault, I know!
Chibnall, this is the dramatic and storytelling meat you could have pulled off of the bones of the idea of the flux and of the consequences of it, and you just didn't. That was ultimately my biggest frustration with Chibnall. Some of it was that I didn't like his ideas, but a lot of it was that he didn't even do much with the ideas he put out. with one scene, a couple of lines, one interaction between characters, Russell T Davies got more out of the fact that a huge swath of the universe is gone than Chibnall even attempted to do. That's impressive. As for the effectively acknowledging, and I'm not going to say canonizing, it was already canon, but the reaffirmation that yes, the timeless child is a thing and the Doctor doesn't know where he comes from, this is about what I expected. Like an acknowledgement that that's the case and then moving on. That's about what I would want from somebody like Russell T Davies. I think, and I've said this repeatedly before, I think the timeless child should be handled the exact same way that the show has handled the fact that it was revealed the Doctor is half human in the TV movie from 1996. Leave it alone and don't talk about it. Did they talk about it here? Yeah. We did get some decent moments out of it, which I just praised a little bit. Well, more than a little bit. It went off on Chibnall a little bit too. Sorry, force of habit. But, you know, I don't think it's a massive damage to be like, yeah, the Doctor doesn't know where he comes from. And as far as whatever impact the timeless child thing is ever going to have on the Doctor, that's about the extent that I would want it to be. I'm okay with it weighing on the Doctor that he doesn't know where he originates from. I don't ever want to find out. I have no interest. I've said before, well, honestly, even within this thing, I've said demystifying things too much takes away some of their power. That is true of these monsters, which it doesn't happen too much, but it happens a little. And that is very true of the Doctor. The more we know about the specifics of his life outside of the adventures we've seen him in, not only do I not care, I actually find that stuff bafflingly and aggressively uninteresting. I don't care where he came from. But you can still get some dramatic weight out of the fact that it eats at him that he doesn't know. Okay. Like, I don't want him to know, but if you want to milk a little drama out of that, okay. I'm okay with that. I don't want the timeless child explored as a concept, but if you want to actually do something with its impact on the Doctor as a character, much like this scene does something with the impact of half the universe being gone, okay, if you want to do that, I can live with that. That's fine. And so coming back to it, every scene where it's, well, honestly, basically every scene from when the copies first show up, it's so good. It's so good watching them one-on-one with each other and like Donna expressing, well, copy Donna expressing that she knows, and later on we find out real Donna doesn't. And I buy that explanation given as to why the copy could actually remember and this Donna can't.
It's too much. It's like looking into a furnace. But I suppose she had a great big outspace brain. She could make sense of it.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. I buy that explanation that this thing was some kind of weird alien cosmic entity that while it was copying Donna, it had its own brain that could fit that info. Donna can't. So like I'm cool with that. But like just getting those moments and seeing the four of them and the back and forth about the fact that Donna can believe two things at once. And like these little things that these not things haven't gotten a hold of yet. The fact that the Doctor one forgot that the tie needs to continue to exist.
Oh, I see. When something is gone, it keeps existing.
He didn't get object permanence yet because he hasn't had enough experience of life to get all the rules, whether it's that or like the arms are a little too long or whatever it might be. Just the little things like they're not quite getting yet just gives it that sense of unease again. Watching them get better and get smarter and get quicker about it.
We're as clever as you now.
And the scene again, you know, where it's all four of them and the Doctor points out, Donna can believe two things at once because these things, whatever they are, they don't get ambivalence yet. They don't get the complexities of having two conflicting thoughts in you at the same time, because that's incredibly human. And they don't know that yet. They don't get that. Not because they're incapable, but because they haven't had cause to learn that that's a thing yet. The salt was kind of cute. I dug that. And I like the way that the Donna copy gets around it, which is to go, wait a minute, and just blow the salt away. Okay, it's not a line anymore. That felt real good. It was a legitimately solid joke where they're like against the wall and the countdown starts and the wall spins and Donna's like, well, that was lucky, but then it spins 360 degrees and they're right back in the room. That was good. That was like a good little joke moment. I really love with the glass wall between them, these entities on one side, Doctor and Donna on the other. The Doctor and Donna like trying to go zen, trying to calm down. All right, we're not thinking. And then these things basically goad the Doctor into thinking because they bring up all the questions that he doesn't have answers to yet. And there's questions that need answers and he cannot stop himself. These scenes, they're great and they're tense and they get the Doctor. They get Donna. It's not just putting them on display. It is examining them. It is pulling them apart for you and going, here's some of the inner workings. And that's a dangerous thing to do with characters because as a rule, often when you start to deconstruct things and start to show the inner workings too much, it can again be that demystification or like they can stop working because you're like, oh, that's how everything operates. Okay, well, now I just know. But like to give us the insight into like the things they can't help. The fact that Donna, even though she knows she's brilliant sometimes, also can't help but think she's stupid. The fact that the Doctor, even though he knows it's literally going to empower the things trying to kill him, can't stop himself from trying to figure things out. That's nice because, again, that's a little bit of a callback to Midnight in that episode, the Doctor tried to talk his way out of a situation, but talking made it worse, but he couldn't stop himself. Here, thinking at a rapid speed, brain firing at 1,000,000 miles an hour, trying to sort everything out, it makes it worse, but he can't help it. Love it. And I like the answers as well. I like the idea that going slow, calm, it's harder for them to read. Like, why? I don't care. I buy it. So with that rule established, the robot starts to make sense. The countdown, well, it gets revealed that it is a countdown, but that starts to make sense. I like the emphasis and the honoring of the captain, the dead captain, because ultimately the Doctor and Donna, well, they made the situation worse by showing up. The captain's plan was always going to work whether they showed up or not. So I like that one of the last things we see when the whole thing blows up is the captain's body. Because, yeah, if it wasn't for the captain, this all would have ended horribly. So, again, it just feels like a nice little acknowledgement of something that often would have been a throwaway, like, oh, there's a dead body. Like, no, let's get some acknowledgement. Like, we're never going to fully see this character, fully characterize them, but we can have a moment or two of appreciation. And I feel like this does that very well. It makes me care about a character we literally never see other than a floating corpse. But I do care a little bit. And I feel a sense of triumph for this dead alien captain when the ship blows up. And the very the way they say that, that's so good. And I love, trying to outwit them. But like, as the not thing Doctor points out, like, we're as clever as you now. Can you really stop us? Just, the back and the forth and the tension. It's so good. And somehow, 2 specials in a row. Davies, part of me knows Donna's gonna survive. But last episode, I got genuinely nervous when the meta crisis filled her up again. She became the Dr. Donna, and they had the moment with the Doctor holding her, and I legitimately choked up. Here, I didn't choke up, but I was terrified. I felt my stomach drop. When the TARDIS shows up, first of all, I love the explanation that because the TARDIS is a time machine and it experiences time a little bit differently, it knows that the not thing Doctor won't succeed and the thing will blow up, so it can come back a little bit early.
But a time machine would know.
I like that. I dig it. Makes sense to me. So, but when the Doctor takes the wrong one, which, first of all, so few shows would have the cojones to do that. Like, generally the point of a scene like that is to show the connection, show the special thing that only they have that this thing couldn't replicate. In the moment, it fooled him. My stomach dropped when I realized that was still Donna left behind.
She's not me! I'm me!
And her watching this explosion, thinking she's gonna die, I was terrified for her. I should have known, like, I'm sure somewhere in the back of my head I did know she's gonna be okay, but dang it, Davies, 2 episodes in a row! You got me on the edge of my seat thinking Donna was gonna die, or at least emotionally being invested as if she was going to, even if part of me knew she wouldn't. You got me again, you... Ow! You... So, this is just great. I love this. I have my nitpicks. Cold open sucks. It flatly sucks. I don't like it at all. And I think that they did too many of the special effects. I think if they had dialed that back, done fewer of them, had them be subtler, I think that would have benefited it more, even more so than it would have just if they just flat out looked better. But the sense of isolation, the sense of tension, the dynamic between these characters, every time there were multiple versions of them in the room, it was always gold. This is really good. And of course we get to see Wilf.
Hey there, folks. It's me during the editing phase. I went on for a little bit about not being sure whether or not Wilf would be seen in the next episode. It's since been confirmed by Russell T Davies that he will not be. So I'm going to jump ahead a bit. I know I'll still be talking in the video as if I don't know, but just be aware that's been confirmed.
I've seen some things that suggest that this scene was all they got shot with Bernard Cribbins before he passed away. And if that's true, and the next episode opens with a small time jump and Donna like thanking the doctor for dropping Wilf off somewhere safe before they try and solve this or whatever, you know, some line to cover that. If this is all we get, God, it choked me up immediately. The sense of joy and relief from him at seeing the doctor and seeing Donna. Oh, damn it. Yep. So if this is it, if they either didn't get stuff shot with him for the next one or they didn't get enough shot where it's usable, if this is it, one scene, made it count. I don't have predictions for the next episode. I don't really do them by and large. I kind of made a small one, which is that I think timelines are in some way are going to be rectified, amended, or in some way healed to cover things for I don't expect the show to say Mavity for the entirety of the rest of however long it runs. So I expect small things like that will, over the course of that story, be reversed or amended or whatever.
And it's now occurred to me that if history being changed so that gravity is called Mavity and that gets addressed and somehow becomes a plot point, that it shows the toy maker's influence in the next episode, that some people will argue, see, there was a reason for the cold open. I will still argue it didn't belong where it was. I would still say, find a way to put it in the previous episode, have it be the cold open to the next one, or have this be between when the Doctor and Donna escape and before they get back to that alley in London. I probably still wouldn't like it regardless, but I'd probably dislike it less if it wasn't the cold open. Just move it.
But I don't really do predictions. My brain doesn't work that way. I'm really bad for speculation. I can't think, ooh, maybe it's this, because part of my brain goes, quit speculating and just watch it in a week. Find out what it is. Then see what you think. The last one was a nostalgic warm bath. This is a tense thrill ride that knows when to slow down, knows when to go quieter, knows when to be tense, knows when to be melancholy, knows when to be funny. A couple of other tiny random things before I close out. I love the interaction between the Doctor and Donna.
You okay?
I will be.
When?
1,000,000 years.
The when in 1,000,000 years, that's cute, but it's the, are you okay? I will be. That's beautiful, because sometimes that's the truth. Are you okay? No, but I will be. I'm gonna be okay, but right now, no. No, I'm not. And I love that as an answer. I love the simplicity of it, and I love the sentiment that it conveys. So the Doctor going Isaac Newton was hot.
He was, wasn't he? He was so hot.
Oh. Is that who I am now?
I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, on the one hand, it seems to confirm that at the very least, this incarnation of the Doctor is bisexual, if not gay.
Well, it was never that far from the surface, mate.
Which, okay. Like, this might be just like the 10th. That doesn't necessarily mean same preferences in terms of romance or sex. But, you know, having that, all right. But I also feel kind of weird about it, especially that it starts with Donna being like, he's really hot.
Was it me, or was Isaac Newton hot?
Because regardless of who you cast as Isaac Newton somewhat famously, like, seemed to be sex repulsed. Like, it's a little bit of an extrapolation on my part to make the claim that I think Isaac Newton was asexual. I do actually think he was, but even if we don't know that for certainty, we know from letters and correspondence that he made that he detested the thought of being sexually involved with women. So the idea that this scene kicks off with Donna basically sexualizing a guy that we know detested the idea of sexual intimacy with women feels a little gross. Like, I know he's dead. He's not going to be offended. I get it. It's just, I don't know. It made the moment weird for me. It might not have if I hadn't done a video earlier this year talking about figures from history that you didn't know were probably some form of queer. As far as the evidence for that he didn't like women, well, he once accused his friend John Locke of having, quote, endeavored to embroil me with women. Go back and check out that video. Isaac Newton was not the only one on there, but I brought him up because I'm pretty sure he was asexual, which is part of the queer community. So I guess because that stuff was in my mind, because I looked into it, researched it for that video, it made the moment land weird for me. Probably nobody else's problem but mine, except pointing it out, it might have made it some other people's problem. Sorry if that was a moment you liked and I've now ruined it for you. I don't mean to do that. It just happens sometimes. For the most part, though, again, I cannot emphasize enough. This is really good. This is the kind of stuff that I love when Doctor Who does, when it goes something weirder, when it strips it down. Like, okay, hold up. We don't need massive cast. We don't need an invading alien force. Seemingly empty ship. 2 people, no tools. Go. This is the creative spirit that gave us episodes like Midnight, but also things like Blink and Heaven Sent and episodes that I dearly love. And this doesn't feel like it's trying to directly be any of those. It's being its own thing, but it's in that vein. It's in that form of like, okay, let's do something different this time. And I love this, especially paired with the previous episode, because it's like, yeah, we can still do the fun stuff you remember. We can also do something else. Good. Please do both. That's what I want. I won't lie. Nostalgia can still hit me. Overall, I always want the show to be moving forward in some way, shape, or form. But I don't mind the occasional hit of nostalgia as long as you're also going to give me something different, which this is, and it's really good. The Giggle, final special of David Tennant's limited run as the 14th Doctor. And I know the thing that has sucked all the oxygen out of the room for every discussion of this episode. I know what it is. I've already had people poking me going, hey, what do you think about this? I will get to it. Let me, however, talk about the rest of the episode up to that thing, which this will also be your spoiler warning. While I am not mentioning what the thing is, and I will get to it a little bit later, I'm just going to be talking about this thing as I go and doing my normal thing of not necessarily going in chronological order all the way through. I am saving one specific thing to address on the back half, but I want to talk about the rest of it first, because even separate from that one thing, I think there's plenty to talk about here, and I'm going to do that. So we open with our introduction or reintroduction if you're a massive Classic Who fan, and I say massive because the Celestial Toymaker, where the character that Neil Patrick Harris is playing originates from, is a lost episode. I believe they're now working on an animated recreation of it, but this is not an episode a lot of people are familiar with outside of maybe reading a wiki about it. It's one of those things that's a bit harder to find, even if you like classic Doctor Who. Well, I say harder to find. The actual episodes you can't find it all until we have the animated recreation. But, there were things that you could look up. There were some still images, there was audio, there were things like that. But that's not a lot to go on, and not everybody is up for just that kind of stuff without the full context of the thing. So he's an interesting pull already. And the other thing that the episode addresses pretty head on as it goes along is that he also dates back to a time in Doctor Who where how grounded Doctor Who as a show was meant to be in reality, for lack of a better way to put it, wasn't as solid yet. Even early on, the show mostly leaned on science and not a ton on outright fantasy. But there were episodes like this, the second Doctor story, The Mind Robber, where the Doctor and his companions are literally trapped in the land of fiction. That kind of gets a sci-fi-ish explanation later, but it's also the kind of concept that, like, modern Doctor Who wouldn't touch this. It's too fairy tale. It's too, this doesn't work with the level of grounded we've gone for. Like, Doctor Who has never been scientifically sound at any point, but it has had an internal logic that's been relatively consistent, especially since the reboot in 2005. And a character like Toymaker breaks it by his nature and how he operates, and the fact that there isn't really a valid scientific explanation for what he can do. And they roll with that. I like that a lot. But I started talking about Neil Patrick Harris. He is clearly having so much fun with this part. And I normally say that as a praise in general. I think it's a good thing. Barring a piece meant to be super serious and dour. But, like, if something's meant to have a sense of fun to it, it always feels nice when the actors feel like they are having fun as well. I consider that a positive, kind of almost objectively, at least to my taste, which means it's not really objective, but you get what I mean. That's something that I think is a good thing under most circumstances. But it's especially important here because kind of the point of the Toymaker is he does this for fun. He's not trying to take over the universe or wipe people out. He has no machinations. There's no philosophy behind this. This isn't Davros, who wants to feel the power within his hand to destroy everything just to know that he could. This isn't the Daleks, who are fundamentally against everything that is not them. This isn't the Cybermen, who have this undercurrent philosophy of everything that can be made into a should be. We are superior. There's none of that. He's just doing it because it's fun. So it is vital that it come across that this character is having a blast, because if he's not, why do it? And the thing is, I could see a version of this character who's much more dour and like make him into more of an obsessive about games, where it's less about fun and it's more of a compulsion. You could do that. I like this better, though. I like just leaning into the idea of he does this for fun. Let him have fun. Right down to lip syncing to freaking Spice Girls and dancing all over Unit. And I love the little moment from the Doctor that kind of addresses head on the fact that you can't explain him by normal rules, because he has this quick exchange with Shirley.
If I told you he manipulates atoms with the power of thought, would you believe it?
Is that what he does?
If you want to think that so we can move forward, sure. Go with that. But no, he doesn't obey the same rules, which I just like. I understand why this kind of loosey-goosey nature is not standard in Doctor Who anymore, and I'm not saying it should become standard. But I like that they do just enough of a justification for why this is the case here. I think Neil Patrick Harris has a lot of fun with it. The shifting accents I found kind of interesting.
Your accent seems to have slipped.
I hope the kiddies enjoy him.
I don't know if there's meant to be a reason why the German is the one he goes to most frequently, but like he drops it for British a few times. He goes American at some point, like especially when he's chastising the Doctor about the companions he's lost. And the Doctor, has the little asterisks that most of these companions have had, so they haven't been totally tragic, that Clara still lives in the last second of her life, that Bill's consciousness lives on. And the Toymaker just goes,
"Oh, well, that's all right then."
Very American. So my read on the different accents is it's just part of the game. It's just him, it's part of his having fun. I'll talk this way because this is fun to me right now. And maybe I'll switch to this accent because I'll feel like that's fun. He can be fickle. He's bound by the rules of whatever game he's playing, but things like how he talks, those aren't bound to rules of games. So he can just be as fickle as he wants. What feels like fun? German right now. German feels like fun. So that's my read on it, at least. And that's a phrase you're going to hear a couple times as I talk about this episode. My read and my interpretation on a few things, because, again, some things, especially when we get to the thing that I'm holding off on, we will get to it. But, there's a fair number of things that sat right with me, but also because I have a certain amount of interpretation that I bring to it that is a little bit extra textual, meaning it is not 100% explicit within the body of the episode. Oh, and before we get any farther, I should note this. At time of recording, I know there is available a behind the scenes segment. It's about 15 minutes on the Doctor Who channel. And I've also heard that there's some other stuff out there that has Russell T. Davies talking about some of the thought process and talking about how some things would work. I have not seen any of that, and that's on purpose, because I want what views I give you here to be based only on the text of the episode itself. I will check those things out later, and if after I've seen them, I feel that they are worth delving into more, maybe I'll do another video, or if it's something I can throw together quickly, maybe I'll do it as a short. No promises, but understand that whatever opinion you hear from me is based strictly off my viewing of this, and more to the point, if you put down in the comments, well, what you said and your read on this is wrong because RTD said this, I'm not trying to be rude about this, but I don't care. I brought this up when I talked about the Davros thing with Children in Need. Interviews are not canon. And while in that one I did still talk about it a little bit, because it is possible that interviews and what is said in interviews could be an indication of what may be canon later and what might be intended. But in and of themselves, they're not canon. Because if you are going to counter anything that I have about my interpretation or my beliefs or my hopes with what RTD said that is not within canon, I am not really going to address it, because just because he said it, again, that just indicates his intention. That doesn't mean that he's actually going to force it to be canon later either. He might not. Again, interviews are not canon. All right, so the toy maker. I like the interactions and the energy that he brings, particularly when interacting directly with Tennant. I think he brings, I actually kind of like Neil Patrick Harris when he does kind of menacing characters. He was quite good in The Matrix Resurrection, which, just as a reminder, was a way better movie than most of you acted like it was. But I like when he brings the sense of menace, but also that sense of fun, which he does really well, and counteracted by the Doctor, who's taking this all very seriously.
Go back to the TARDIS.
You never tell me to do that.
And I love the Doctor initially trying to take him on just with the cutting of the deck, because he has the ace up his sleeve of best 2 out of 3, which was very clever. But what I like about that is he's rolling the dice. There is even odds that he will win right now and this whole thing will be over. It isn't, and we move on to his safety net that he already figured out, best 2 out of 3, but I just like that he was willing to roll those dice. I like that. That was good. The puppet imagery was decently creepy. I'd say, here's the thing. I've said before that I don't find old style puppets or dolls particularly creepy in and of themselves. It's part of why some of the inherent creepiness that really got people about Night Terrors didn't really work on me, because I just don't find those dolls that creepy. I will say that with the puppets, they leaned into the creepy nature by the way they acted. Not just the fact marionette, a little bit of a ventriloquist dummy thing going. No, the way that they behaved and the thing that it said, especially the widow puppet, I guess.
I'm poor wee Sticky Sue. I don't know what to do.
It made it a bit more creepy. Not in a way that actually actively creeped me out, but I'm like, see, this is more effective than just showing me a creepy doll and be like, doesn't this creep you out? I'm like, no. You have to actually do something creepy with it, which this does. So I did like that. And the human-sized mannequin, especially when it was briefly the Doctor.
I thought I was proud.
Good imagery, solid. I like it. And I loves me a non-Euclidean maze. You go through a door, it doesn't go where it should, and you try to go back through it, it doesn't take you to where you were before. They become a mild cliche thanks to a lot of video games like Layers of Fear or even PT, going back to that. But it's still effective if you can do it well. And this does it well and doesn't lean on it too hard where it gets old. It does it for just long enough that it's effective. And also, despite some people telling me in the comments of the previous one that, you know what, Donna said she didn't remember all the Doctor's history and that it must have just been in the not things brain and she can't hold it. Fair number of people said, you know what, I think she actually does remember. It's just being nice to him. That didn't sit right with me. I didn't reply to those comments. That didn't sit right with me because I'm like, I don't think they're at a point where she's going to lie to him to spare his feelings. Like, I understand she'd be gentle, but I don't think she'd lie to him. And I got a nice confirmation on that because it has to be reiterated to her through, you know, the little marionette show talking about Amy, Clara, Bill, the Flux. She doesn't remember. She actually asked the question,
is all of this true?
And again, bringing up the Flux again and giving more weight to the consequences of the thing that Chibnall did that he just ignored the consequences on. So again, I like that being reiterated. I'm not entirely positive that the having the salt superstition at the edge of the universe was a necessary move for bringing in the toy maker. I mean, it works well enough.
I cast that salt at the edge of the universe. I played a game and let him in.
I think it would have, personally at least, worked a little better for me if it wasn't the episode immediately following, if like there had been some time between. I know in this case that wasn't going to happen. David Tennant was only doing the 3 specials. So like that was never going to be the case. But I don't know. I feel like that plant and payoff would have landed a little bit better for me and felt a little bit more clever if I'd had the time to forget that that happened and then bringing it back later, bringing it back immediately after. Like, it's like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah. Sure, that works. Why not? So since I'm already talking about the toy maker, let's talk about the Giggle and how it operates, because the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Now, this is also where we're going to get a little bit into my interpretations of how all this works, not necessarily the intended canon of how it works, because I'm going to zero in on Kate Lethbridge-Stewart to explain what I mean by this. I really like the way that the toy maker explains it.
Why does everyone think they're right?
So that they win. I made every opinion supreme.
Everybody just thinks that they're right on their first impulses because that way they'll always try to win. That framing, giving humanity that perspective of you're either winning or you're losing. See, normally dropping a line about like cancel culture, which is dropped in there a little bit.
That's the game of the 21st century. They shout, and they type, and they cancel.
That would normally annoy me. This is actually a time where, like, it's not making a huge thing out of it, but dropping that, if this is the point you're making, that humans, when they are forced into a mindset of you are right, and you have to go out and prove it, and you have to win on the fact that you're right, otherwise you lose, forcing that to be the lens through which we view the world, yeah, that does feed into a lot of the most toxic behavior, particularly online behavior. And tying that through a single line to cancel culture without turning it into a whole, and cancel culture is terrible, and here's all these examples of it, because that's often where things get really dicey. But just acknowledging it as like, yeah, it can very easily, is not necessarily always, in my view, but can very easily become part of a, we have to win, and the other side has to lose, and we're drawing battle lines, and we're making this zero-sum game of win or lose. Yeah, it feeds into the toxic side of human nature. So I said I was going to zero in on Kate. So here's what I really like about what they used to illustrate with her. These things that she says, that she is distrusting of the Doctor because he's an alien.
We've been infiltrated by aliens, by a man with 2 hearts, a man who changes his face and cannot be trusted.
And also the stuff that she says towards Shirley. I'll focus on that a little more specifically in a minute. But what I like about that is that My read on this is that it is basically locking people in to dying on the hill of their gut instinct and their base level responses. And I'll try and explain what I mean by that. For Kate, it makes total sense, regardless of how much time she spent with the doctor, working with the doctor, given that she is the daughter of the brigadier, that she herself has been fighting aliens for most of her life. Her natural gut instinct is going to be distrust. Now, normally when working with the doctor, she overcomes that initial distrust with the, reminding yourself, okay, but he's on our side, he helps us, he's that thing. But at the core, underneath that, is still that seed of xenophobia, that fear of the other, that distrust of the other. And what the Giggle appears to have done is remove the higher layer of brain functions that look at the gut reaction she has and go, okay, wait a minute. That doesn't apply here, or that's not helpful. So here's what I've said elsewhere that I'm going to reiterate here. And I've said this oftentimes talking with people who are working on getting better about certain aspects of how they view the world and treat other people. And oftentimes they will have a lot of concerns because they'll still have that seed, they'll still have that initial thought in their head that is racist, sexist, homophobic, etc. And when I say people, I'm not strictly saying people who aren't me. No. I've had to deal with this too. What I've said in those cases is you are not fully responsible for your gut instinct or your first emotional reaction to something. Because of what you have been through in your life and the society that you have been raised in and the environment around you, your initial gut reaction is something that you will have very little control over. And you are not fully responsible for having an initial gut in your head reaction that is racist, sexist, homophobic, etc. And I say for the most part, if you haven't been trying to work on that and you're just letting it happen, that's a problem. But that kind of gets to the second part of what I tend to tell people. You are not fully, solely responsible for that initial thought that is carrying that seed of something that you know is wrong. You're not fully responsible for that because it is a gut instinct that's going to take a very long time to get rid of, if it's even possible to do at all. But what you absolutely are responsible for is what you do as a result of that gut reaction. Because one of the least helpful things that can happen is somebody encounters something or sees something and has a bigoted thought in their head about it, and then goes, oh gosh, I'm such a terrible person, I still think that, oh, what's wrong with me? You're not helping anybody doing that. You're not helping yourself, and you're not helping anybody else, and you're not getting better. What you can do is go, okay, would have been nice if I hadn't had that thought, but here's why I know it's wrong. Your higher brain functions go, okay, yeah, that was a thought I'm not proud of, but I don't have to act on it. Here's why it's wrong. Here's why I'm not going to say that. Here's what I know that overrides, improves that gut instinct that I can't fully control. Wrong. You're not responsible for your first gut reaction, but you are responsible for whether or not you act on it or tamp it down. And I don't mean in a repression way. I mean, take into account what it is you're doing and not just take your first impulse and go, this is the hill I will die on. And that is my read on what the Giggle is. It removes that higher level, that sort of checks and balance, so that whatever your initial gut response is, you just do that so hard. So for Kate, with the doctor, he's an alien and aliens are harmful to us, doesn't get tempered by what would be her normal brain function, which is, but I know the doctor, but he's helped us, but there isn't time for that. Those aren't allowed to come in. And we see that also with her interactions with Shirley, accusing Shirley of not actually being disabled.
And as for her in that chair, I've seen you walk, I've seen you walking, don't deny it!
And that was really well done. And I had already loved before that they showed her get up out of the chair and stand at a console. Because given the depictions we are normally shown of disabled people, such as wheelchair users, is that they are always in this. This is the only way they get around. When the reality is, there are many people who make use of mobility aids, be they wheelchairs or anything else, where they are not 100% all the time restricted to this. Some of them can stand up. Some of them can even walk to some degree. But what they can't do is engage with the degree of walking that society is built around assuming that they can do. That's what they can't do. They may not have the stamina in their legs. They may not have the coordination, whatever it might be that is limiting them. That doesn't mean they can't stand. That doesn't mean they can't take some steps. And if they can stand and can take some steps, that does not mean they're faking it. But because our media depictions generally rolls with the idea of, well, you're in a wheelchair, that's it. That's all you're ever going to be. It makes people react the way that Kate reacts when she's not having those higher functions calming her down, which is, I've seen you get up, so you're faking it. And to be clear, this doesn't just impact people who use mobility aids. This is an issue for people who are deaf, for people who are blind. You can be designated legally deaf or legally blind without being totally deaf or totally blind. And because maybe you are legally blind in the sense that, okay, we know you should not be allowed to operate a car, or, you need these assistances in order to get through life for both your safety and the safety of others. But they'll notice that someone's waving at them, and then some jackass will go, you're not blind. Like, no, they could see the shape. They responded to a shape, but not well enough that they could function the way someone who doesn't have any issues with their sight, or can have their sight more or less fully corrected by lenses. They can't do what those people will do. And society is built on the assumption that your sight is at a certain base level. And if theirs is so far below that, then that does not mean they see literally nothing, but it means they can't see well enough to function the way the rest of us function. And similarly with hard of hearing, it doesn't mean you can't hear literally anything. It just means you can't do it well enough for whatever reason, without assistance or possibly not at all, to be able to function in the way the society is constructed on the assumption you can do those things. So I already loved the fact that Shirley stood up and just very subtly, initially, addressed that core fact of people with disability. But then to see Kate, who knows her and appears to respect her and is horrified once she gets her senses back at what she has done.
Shirley, I'm so sorry.
I think that was a good organic way to draw attention to this entire issue, with a character that I was already enjoying from her first appearance in Star Beast. And I like that it feeds into demonstrating how the giggle works. So it's not superfluous. It's giving us two examples so we know it's not unique to the Doctor. She has a xenophobic reaction to the Doctor and an ableist reaction towards Shirley. So we get multiple examples to get an idea of how this thing frickin' works. And I think it is well done and well integrated into the story. And anyone who says it's just there for pandering obviously does not understand how you weave these things into a story. Like, look, things can be done incredibly clunkily and feel forced and be like, why was that even there? I know why this is here. It is demonstrating in two ways, because I think it is important to do it in more than just one, just to really make the point of how this works. It's demonstrating in two ways what the giggle does to people, and it is using the open opportunity of that to demonstrate a problem that exists in society. That, to me, is well integrated writing. That is very soundly integrating a societal point into a story that benefits from you making that point. I think this is all really well done. Since we're on the topic of Shirley, the ramp at the end showing the TARDIS is wheelchair accessible, that is really nice, because I didn't clock this at first when we first saw the new TARDIS in Star Beast. Other people pointed out in my comments, it's all ramps, which means someone who makes use of a wheelchair can move around in there. I didn't clock that initially. I was like, oh, cool. But funnily enough, again, because I'm not disabled and I have blind spots around this, my mobility does not require assistance. So it didn't occur to me that even though the interior was navigable by use of a wheelchair, that there was still that bump, there's still that step up. And now there's a little ramp to flip out. It wouldn't have occurred to me that the TARDIS needed that as well. And of course it wouldn't have occurred to me. I don't need a mobility aid, so I have blind spots. This was a little bit that I did catch a little tiny bit of behind the scenes, because evidently some things noted by fans of the show who are wheelchair users, that found its way to RTD.
He actually told me about a fan who'd contacted him, who was a wheelchair user, and said how much he admired Russell's work. He said, even though I can't get in the TARDIS because it's not wheelchair accessible.
And he didn't want them to feel excluded, like they couldn't also travel in the TARDIS. This is a tiny thing that just means the show is opening up and embracing and allowing a portion of the audience that previously had a certain barrier to the idea that they could be the companion or they could be the Doctor as themselves. That barrier is now gone. I see that only as a positive thing.
You finally caught up with the 21st century.
So the other thing I want to talk about the Giggle is that it also gets us some interesting moments with this Doctor, with the 14th Doctor, because he does something that I like seeing when it's done well. And like, this can go either way for me. So he notes that, you know, human beings, for all your brilliance, you've got a lot of problems under the surface. You've got a lot of base instincts that are there that sometimes you don't overcome. And all those are running rampant.
All the anger out there on the street, the lies, the righteousness, that's human, that's you, that's who you are. Using your intelligence to be stupid.
This is nice for me to see, particularly coming from a Doctor with David Tennant's face. So it can go to either extreme for me, and not work for me in both cases, although not to the same degree. I'll get to that in a second. The idea of the Doctor blanketly condemning humans or blanketly praising humans. In terms of blanketly condemning, that tends to bother me a little bit less, because usually when that happens, like say when the 9th Doctor made a general complaint about, you know, stupid apes.
I did it again. I picked another stupid ape.
That came at a moment where he was just emotionally frustrated, and I understood why he said that and didn't necessarily feel core to how he viewed people. And the 9th Doctor was in a dour place anyways. But then there's the other extreme, which we saw from characters like the 10th Doctor relatively frequently. Not exclusively the 10th Doctor, but we did see it a fair bit with the 10th Doctor. This whole thing, oh, humans, oh, you're so brilliant and you're so wonderful. I love this and this and this and this about you.
Human beings, you are amazing.
That used to really bug me. I mean, I say used to. It didn't stop bugging me, but it happens less often, or at least I notice it less often as time has gone on. But that really did annoy me because, look, I don't think there's a problem with the Doctor, again, especially Tennant's Doctor, who didn't think he had a home in Gallifrey anymore at the time, to have a very strong affinity for humanity. I think there's nothing wrong with him having a soft spot and enjoying humans. I do kind of have a problem with him aggrandizing them and talking about them like there's somehow the most special thing ever. Sometimes it can work, like in The End of Time Part 2.
We must look like insects to you.
I think you look like giants.
That does work because of the specific framing and him talking to that character in particular. That works. Side note real quick, Wilf, I know we couldn't get Bernard Cribbins back for this. We were stuck with a body double in the opening scene, but I also really like that they have the dialogue that he's in the garden shooting at moles.
But here we are. Grandad Noel.
I like the acknowledgement that he's still there, that he's not gone, and that was kind of all they could do, and I'm glad that they did it. So it still felt like there was a presence there, even though the actor sadly passed away and could not appear. So anyway, coming back. So like that conversation he has with Wilf, and that felt less overall aggrandizing because it feeds into the fact that in a little bit, that Doctor, the 10th Doctor, was going to sacrifice himself to save Wilf. So it was kind of important in that story to reiterate the idea that he doesn't think he's above humanity, and he sees a lot of beauty in them. But there are other times where he'll just go off on like, oh, humans, look at you out there doing all this, and it just bugs me. Like, for all the things you've seen, all the species, planets, all over space and time. If you are implying that we are as good as it gets, that's real depressing. Like, you can have a soft spot for something and also not think it's the best thing ever. I am more okay with the idea that humanity is the Doctor's guilty pleasure than like something that he thinks is wonderful and amazing, which is how he has frequently acted at various points in the past. And again, not exclusively the Tennant Doctor, but it happened a fair bit under him. But to have him in particular acknowledge this other side of humanity.
The human race might be clever and bright and brilliant. It's also savage and venal and relentless.
And especially because it doesn't feel like he's saying it in a way that negates any of the praise he's given, but it's his acknowledgement here that, yeah, you guys can be amazing, but boy, you've got some issues. Because yeah, individually and collectively, yeah, we do. Good. The blind praising of human beings by, not just the Doctor, by aliens in general. It's a little bit of a sci-fi trope. It comes up every now and then where you'll just get non-human species being like, yes, I truly admire humans. They have this that no other species have. And I'm like, BS. Nonsense. I don't buy that for a second. You're just finding an excuse to make humans look like the best thing. And please tell me we're not. So that was a moment that I just liked. That felt like it was there for me almost. And actually, since we've kind of touched on it now, I want to address the idea of how this Doctor is, admittedly, in some ways different from the 10th. I had kind of mentioned previously, I think in both episodes, that I didn't see a huge difference between this Doctor and the 10th Doctor. And I've gotten pushback on that in both of my previous 2 reviews. And I want to clarify exactly where my headspace was at. Because I think, to a certain degree, people were like looking at this Doctor and thinking of, I don't know, Series 2, Series 3, heck, even Series 4 Doctor, and going, well, no, this one's quite a bit different. He's gentler, he's softer, he's easy, he opens up easier, he's more inclined to say that he loves someone. Like, okay, yes, that's all true, but what I meant more was not that he's behaving exactly like 10, but what he is doing is behaving as I would expect 10 to have developed if he hadn't regenerated when he did. Taking the experiences from the End of Time parts 1 and 2 and continuing on, regardless of whether he had the exact same experiences as the other incarnations. But moving forward from that, if David Tennant just stayed in the part this whole time, this is kind of how I would have expected him to end up as eventually. So that's a little bit more what I meant, and less that it feels exactly like 10, but more like, yeah, this feels like if 10 had stuck around. But I think that I see the value in doing that in this episode pretty well. I saw some value in it in the previous episode in Wild Blue Yonder because you really needed that established dynamic between the Doctor and Donna for so much of that episode to work at all, and having the Doctor be more distinctly different, which was my gut instinct for what I wanted. That dynamic wouldn't have worked at all if he was completely different in his behavior. In general, like, I still like the idea of a Doctor with a pre-existing face but a different personality. I still kind of like that as a notion, but that's not what they did. And what they've done does play much better if he feels very connected to the 10th Doctor, which, especially stuff that goes on towards the tail end, and yes, I promise we will get there, that feels like this is doing stories that benefit from him feeling fundamentally, in my opinion, like the 10th Doctor, or at least like an evolution of the 10th Doctor. These stories benefit from that, which is good. Because if you're going to take an idea that I am resistant to, the very least you could do is use that idea to tell stories that you couldn't tell if you didn't use that idea. Hold on to that notion. We will be coming back to it. But the last thing that I think I will say before we get to the big spoiler stuff and the thing I know you've all been waiting to hear my opinion on, tying into the fact that this Doctor feels quite a bit like the 10th, but also a bit different. He has his confrontation with the toy maker, and he doesn't do what 10 usually did, which is to issue a warning, which is to say, you need to stop or I will take you apart.
Why would I leave this place?
Because if you don't, I'll have to stop you.
Instead, he offers a hand in friendship.
We can take your games back to the stars. We can play across the cosmos.
He offers to travel with the toy maker with no threat. No, if you don't, I will do X. Just come with me and we'll play. The games will be across the stars. Now, this is not the first time he's done that. He did that with the Master.
We could travel the stars. It would be my honor. Because you don't need to own the universe. Just see it.
That was a character that he had a very specific and at one point previously friendly history. He's now extending that level of empathy and offer to just, we don't have to fight. And not, again, not in a threat way, not in a, I know what I'll have to do if you turn me down way, just as a way to try and bring an end to this. He's offering that to someone who has only ever been his enemy. I like that as an evolution for him. There was one other thing to touch on quickly. Mel showing up is fine. I don't feel like there is as much dug into with her as they did with, say, Ace or Tegan in Power of the Doctor. But then again, Mel's on-screen appearances, there isn't as much to deal with. There were little acknowledgments of her past. I like the mention of Sabalong Glitz, and it was decently done. She doesn't add a ton by her presence, but she also doesn't detract. And if you're someone who is increasingly enjoying Classic Who, then yeah, she's a fun addition, but she doesn't need to be there, but she's not a focus either. So she's a unnecessary but fun addition. But okay, let's talk about the thing. The bi-generation. Oh boy. Yeah. Okay, so this is a whole thing. And it took me a little while to figure out my thoughts on this. And I also did something that I normally don't do. Something that I very deliberately do not do when I do these, reviews on most things, unless I'm getting to something very late and I had no way of avoiding what the general opinion of it is. That happened with, say, Barbie. Unless that happens, especially with something that I'm planning to see right off, I do not see other people's reviews before I sit down to shoot my own. And I held true to that, but I bent it a teeny bit. I did, after seeing it, bum around Twitter a little bit to kind of gauge general reaction to this. Now, I was very careful to spend very little time on this. I didn't dive down a rabbit hole because I didn't want to get the full brunt of the discourse. So what I found, and this was very handy, was Crispy Pro, who is another Doctor Who focused YouTuber, who's very good, by the way, and who I enjoy his work, and I feel like he and I are often on the same page, not necessarily in terms of our preferences or what we like or don't like, but the fact that I think we both largely approach the show as something that we always want to like, whether or not we do. So knowing that, knowing him, and knowing that's the kind of viewer he cultivates, checking when he put out a tweet asking what do people think of this, and just browsing through the replies on that, and doing it relatively early before it had the possibility to, turn into just toxicity, which it's Twitter. That can happen regardless of what the fandom is or what anybody says. But what I saw there was a fair number of people basically amounting to, I liked it up until the bi-generation, or people going like, I don't know what I feel about the bi-generation. So this, at least from my quick glance, which was all I was willing to do before sitting down to shoot this, people seem a little bit divided on this. And I do get why. If you are very much into the logistics, the mechanics, and the continuity and preserving canon, then yeah, this is going to bug you. There would have been a time not too long ago where I might have made a joke like, if continuity and being consistent matters that much to you, why are you even watching Doctor Who? Because this show's never been good about that. And that is true, but I'm not doing anybody any favors by pretending that an audience who cares about this doesn't exist. I know them. I've met them in my comments and at conventions. I know that there is a fandom that, as inconsistent as the show has been, that the way that they approach this and possibly other media as well, they still want a certain amount of consistency. They want things to behave by the rules that as they understand them. And I'm not immune to that myself. My own general thing is, I don't need things to match reality, but I would like it if you would adhere to the rules you have established. And if you're gonna break them, please tell me why. That is my general base level. And for me, and for my looking at and interpreting this, I do feel that there is something that, at least for me, works, which is, yes, the toy maker can do all these things that break all the rules, all the laws of physics, the laws of reality as we know them. And in my mind, by his presence, the rules are a little in flux, kind of for everything.
What if the toy maker's domain is still lingering? Just for a few seconds while we're in a state of play.
Not fully, not like anything could happen, but like something that otherwise, as the 15th Doctor, Shurigatawa's Doctor, says, shouldn't be possible and is only a myth.
I have bi-generated. There's no such thing. Bi-generation is supposed to be a myth.
It could happen now. Now, is it a little bit of a cop-out to be like, well, this is a mythological thing. It's never happened before. Like, since when? That is a little bit of, pulling it out of your rear end. But I think just having the toy maker present and the nature of what he is and how he operates, to me, just having him there makes the rules flexible enough that I'm okay with this happening this time in terms of, like, regeneration has never worked like this before. Now, normally that would bother me, but in this case, I feel like that explanation, at least for me in my head, works. That having been said, on paper, I really would have said this is a bad idea. Because, first of all, the general idea of having two doctors interacting with each other in a way that isn't acknowledged as breaking the rules of time and space, and it isn't a case of like Tennant's doctor is lingering, but he's only going to last a short amount of time, or it's not happening at the edge, which was introduced in The Power of Doctor and is a cool idea. And, we're not doing any of that. They're just both existing. No, don't do that. That's a really bad idea. That is just begging for people to continually demand the return of Tennant's doctor and to just say forever, boy, the show would have been so great if he just stayed on. They kept that doctor around. Why didn't they? And like, fans may or may not still do that. But like, if you were just to tell me the idea, I would look at it and go, I don't see what we gain. And it's just going to cause so many headaches and so many arguments. Can this possibly be worth it? And here's the funny thing. I think it is. Because kind of like what I said before, you can do something that I think is a bad idea, but if you do something with it that you couldn't have done otherwise, and that thing is worth doing, brings me joy, if I see this thing, I go, okay, I enjoy that, and you couldn't have done it if you hadn't done this thing that I thought was a bad idea, that can work. And it does here in a number of ways. There is a little bit of kind of the campy goofiness of the visual of them being pulled apart, and then they're each in half of the outfit, which took me a second to realize that that is what had happened. Ah, dang it. I meant to let my hair down for this half. I suppose the question people are really wondering is, am I not wearing proper trousers? I don't know. What did that sound like? We do authenticity around here. Anyways, yeah, the visual is a little bit on the silly side. It's RTD doing Doctor Who. You kind of have to deal with a certain amount of that. And it's been made clear over the course of these three specials that, yes, he's not going to abandon some of his goofier, campier instincts in regards to the show. But when I say that this does something that could not have happened if not for the choice to do the bi-generation, here is what I mean. This becomes a vehicle to do something that the show could never do unless the show was ending, and I mean permanently. It gives a doctor a happy ending.
I've never been so happy in my life.
That can't happen. Because any other time, to have a doctor and have them settle and be happy and just live and not feel the need to gallivant about and run away from their own baggage, that would mean the show's over. Because the doctor's no longer going about having adventures all the dang time. So what's the show at that point? The show has to be over. That has to be how you end the entire thing. And honestly, I've said in the past, my notion for the perfect way to end the show, if anybody ever did decide to end it permanently, would be to have the Doctor, whatever incarnation is around at that point, to go and see Susan, his granddaughter, who when he left her, when the first Doctor left her, said,
One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back.
and I would say going with her and settling in and saying, I'm done traveling, I'm home, would be the way to end the whole show. And this basically does that with the equivalent of the 10th Doctor. Again, I know the 14th is a little bit different behaviorally, but having him settle with Donna feels emotionally to me the same vein as having the first or any incarnation of the Doctor go back to Susan. And you can't do that without ending the show or undoing it. One of two things would have to happen if they attempted to do this in any other way. Either the show would have to end, and inevitably, because we live in a time when franchises are not allowed to die, somebody would bring it back, either by injecting all these interstitial stuff and like, oh, well, here was a regeneration you didn't know about, happened in between, and then it's effectively like the show hasn't ended, or by just undoing the happy ending and sending the Doctor off again, and then it's like, what was the point? But he can have it. He can have the happy ending, the family. He still has his TARDIS, but because there's another Doctor who is clearly, demonstrably, super eager to go out and have adventures and go out and save the universe, this one doesn't have to. The things that would drive him to always keep going and never slow down don't have to apply to him anymore. He doesn't have to worry, what about all the planets in danger? What if the universe is in jeopardy? The Doctor is going to take care of that. And even what gets addressed in this episode, this idea of I have to keep running because if I slow down, all the sadness hits.
What am I? What am I now?
This Doctor is not self-reflecting because he won't stop moving. He's not even really pausing to have a proper conversation with Donna. He's just moving as fast as he can because slowing down might mean, at least for this incarnation, not necessarily every incarnation, but in this incarnation, slowing down might mean realizing how unhappy he is doing what he's doing and realizing he'd like to stop. But also giving him a TARDIS so that, yeah, he can take Rose to a jaunt to Mars. He can do a quick thing here or there.
He took me to New York last week. The Gilded Age. It was amazing. Well,
where the TARDIS becomes like a camper van. It's something you load the family into and have a little holiday, but you don't live in it. You don't have to constantly be traveling. It's there for when you need it, but you can relax. You can just have a home. There has never been the opportunity to tell that story on this show, and I don't know of any way you could have done it without doing something like this. And I'm sure some will argue with me, well, what about the Meta-Crisis Doctor? That version of the 10th Doctor got to have Rose and was given, in theory, the ability to create his own TARDIS and is moving all about that universe. Isn't that kind of a happy ending? For that version of the Doctor that we never saw again, sure, it is, but there was still the tinge of sadness on it because the one we followed back to our universe still had to deal with the weight and the loss. What this whole thing allows us to do is have a regeneration without the tragedy. Because no matter how excited you are for any new Doctor, be it Ncuti Gatwa or anybody else, and I will talk a little bit about his performance in particular, again, let me get through stuff. This is a long one if you hadn't guessed already. What is really nice about this is no matter how excited you are about a Doctor, normally there's that sense of loss. But this other one's gone. We get just once to have a regeneration without the sadness. And I think there was a time 15 years ago or so where I would have said, like, but the sadness is powerful. Don't do it without sadness. And I'm not saying I want this to become the template. I'm not saying I ever want this to happen ever again. But just once.
Funny thing is, I fought all those battles for all those years. And now I know what for. This.
To let it be the happiest version of regeneration it can be. Where Donna and her family aren't left mourning a version of the Doctor that died. Where we don't have to see him gone. Where the audience doesn't have to mourn. And also just get to enjoy the excitement of a new Doctor. That's magical. And this is what I mean. This is the perfect version of having your cake and eating it too. Because we're getting the excitement of the new Doctor and we're getting this happy ending. But as I said, normally the only way to get an ending like this would be to end the show. But we get it here and the show doesn't have to end. More adventures. And I'm sure some people are going to go, well, yeah, but you know they're going to bring him back because he's still hanging around. Here's the thing, I'm not so sure about that because I assumed that about the Meta-Crisis Doctor. I had assumed for so long, oh, they created this other version of the Doctor just so they can bring David Tennant back at a later point. But then eventually when they did bring David Tennant back, they didn't do it with the Meta-Crisis Doctor. I normally would make that same kind of assumption. Like, oh, well, they're just gonna have him come back at a later time, and you know they're gonna I don't know. Because I assumed that before and I was wrong. I assumed that with this writer, and I was wrong. And if somebody can prove me wrong on something that I was dead certain about, that was very much in the same vein, I'm not taking it as a given that we're gonna see this Doctor again. I am going to hope that he just gets to have his happy ending. I know there will be some people who say, well, he should come back. The same way there are some people who are like, Marvel should bring back Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. No, they shouldn't. They had their endings. Let them have their endings. Let this Doctor have his ending. It finally wasn't a sad one. Let him have it. And I have a certain amount of faith that will be allowed to stand. And if it turns out later that they do bring him back, I'll probably be annoyed. But for right now, not really feeling comfortable and assuming that will definitely happen, this just feels good. This just feels wonderful. And this kind of having your cake and eating it too is really hard to pull off because Davies himself has failed at it before. Series 3, the whole thing with Martha and the two-parter that ended that, where Hawk LaFane come down, and that was also an attempt to disrupt the Doctor's faith in humanity, but it didn't stick. He went right back to praising humanity all over the place right after that, so that felt like it didn't stick. That tried to have its cake and eat it too by having this massive decimation of the human population, humans living for a year under complete domination by the Toclafane and the Master, and then at the end of it, everything rolls back and just a handful of people remember it all. That was a kind of having your cake and eating it too that is much more common. That is usually what you get because it wanted to have the much higher stakes, but then not have the full consequences. And if you're going to roll back most of the consequences, nearly all of the consequences of what it was you did, then why'd you do it? Now, there are ways around that, but I don't think that story did it successfully. Here, this is having your cake and eating it too in the best way. Because it's not about avoiding anything. It's about letting us have something that we couldn't have any other way. To see the Doctor at a table in a garden having dinner with an adopted family. That's beautiful. Just once. Let him have it. The bi-generation is a wonky idea. But to compare it to one that drove me crazy, so's the Timeless Child. The difference is, the Timeless Child not only didn't result in a story that couldn't be told otherwise, it arguably didn't result in any stories at all. There was almost nothing built off that idea. There was almost nothing done with that idea. It is an idea that I do not ever want to see repeated. I do not want this to become the standard of how regeneration works. I do not care if the Tennant Doctor can regenerate into somebody else. I don't want that ever to be brought up again. Just leave it alone. I don't want the rolling consequences of this. I want it to be its own nice isolated thing. So I am still iffy about this ever happening again. But for this time, within this isolation, right now at time of talking, I like this. As much as I think that's a bad idea, You built something beautiful that you couldn't build without the foundation of that idea. Whereas The Timeless Child, there was almost nothing built on top of it. And the stories told after that revelation could have happened almost identically without it. That's the difference. You can do something that I think is a bad idea and turn me around on it. Not because I suddenly think it's a better idea. I still think, within just looking at the notion, I still think the idea of bi-generation is a bad idea. But dang it, Davies, you built something beautiful with it. You made something that we wouldn't have gotten and we couldn't see otherwise. And I got to give it to you for that. That's amazing. All right, so Ncuti Gatwa himself. This might be my one criticism of the episode. Not that I don't like how he played it. I like how he played it. He had a lot of energy, great smile, wonderful presence. I do feel I didn't get a full sense of him yet because a lot of what he was doing was playing off of Tennant's Doctor. And I don't think that necessarily takes away from Gatwa's Doctor, but it does kind of distract from my ability to get a full read on him. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Most doctors, I didn't feel like I had a proper read on in their first appearance. Really, the only ones where that has been the case, at least since the 2005 reboot-ish thing started, was Eccleston and Matt Smith. Within their first appearances, I felt like I got them right off. Tennant took a little while. Capaldi took quite a while, but he's now my favorite. Whitaker, sometimes she worked. But that one, it was a while before I started to get an angle on her that worked for me. Like, more often than not, I don't fully settle on like feeling like I get a doctor right away, but I feel like for how much screen time he gets, yeah, maybe I should have a better idea than I do, but I don't have that much of an idea because I don't get to see him on his own. That concern is pretty heavily mitigated by the fact that I'm going to see him again in a pretty short amount of time because he's got the Christmas special. If we were going to have to wait, like, I don't know, 6 months for his first proper series, or I guess they're going to call this one a season. If I had to wait like 6 months for that, I'd be a little bit more annoyed, but I'm like, I can wait a little while to see what he's like on his own. And yes, I have seen the very short trailer for the Christmas special. I don't really have opinions on it. There isn't enough to go off of. I'm excited for it. I want to see what he does. But I like the energy. I like the energy that he brought, and that's kind of all I have to go on right now. Also because what makes a doctor workable is not just who they are, but also the stories told with them. And this is far more the 14th Doctor story than the 15th. So I can't really gauge him on that basis yet. I'll be able to at least start trying to do so after the Christmas special. So solid first appearance. I like the energy. I don't have a fully settled opinion yet, but that's also pretty typical for me with most doctors post-regeneration. It usually takes me a little while. Seriously, though, with Capaldi, it took me until his 3rd season to fully fall in love with him. But I did, so we'll see how long it takes. Couple of quick things that basically amount to setup. We have this whole thing with like the essence of the master contained in his tooth, and then that gets picked up by the end by a hand with nail polish on it. This is very deliberately a callback because RTD already did this with after the master died at the end of series 3, and there was the ring, there was a hand that picked it. Now, I'm certain a ton of people are already going to be speculating it's the Ronnie, and like at this point, it hasn't been the Ronnie for so long. As much as I don't really care for the Ronnie, I could see RTD going, it finally was. But like he did jokingly call that the hand of the Ronnie back after series 3 came out, when ultimately when he did bring back the John Sim Master, he did something else with it. So don't assume don't assume anything. It will be the mechanism by which the Master comes back. Which Master will it be? No idea. My gut instinct will be new incarnation, because we don't know which incarnation the toy maker encountered and trapped the essence of. It's possible that it is one we've already seen. It could be Dewan. Heck, the toy maker could have swept in and recovered Missy as she was dying and trapped her. You could theoretically do that. I'm expecting it to be a new incarnation. That's my gut instinct. we'll see down the line when this gets pulled on. And that might not necessarily be done by RTD. Again, I've been watching this stuff long enough. I do remember at the time when Series 3 came out, he said that he didn't necessarily have a plan for the Master to come back, but he still planted that ring so that there would be a way that the Master could come back should somebody decide to do it. Turned out he decided to do it before he finished up. He may not actually be the one to pick up the tooth thing, but it's there for whoever does, whether it's him or whether it's a future showrunner. Again, regardless of who it is, I expect probably a new incarnation. There's also the thing from the toy maker about the one who waits.
There's only one player I didn't dare face. The one who waits.
Which presumably also ties into what the Meep alluded to about the boss.
Cryptic. I hate that.
One is kind of led to assume, just because it would be really weird if they were both referring to something else, that those are one and the same. And I have no theories. If you're new around here, I'm real bad at speculation. My brain doesn't work that way. My brain, rather than going like, ooh, here's all the deep lore, and ooh, it could be this and connected to that, and here's the conspiracy board where it all connects. Like, I can't really do that because there's a part of my brain that just goes, just wait and find out what it is. Why are you wasting your mental energy on this? So I very rarely do speculation unless something clicks, which is pretty rare. So I don't really have any speculation on like, ooh, who could it be? It could be anything. And I'd say it has at least as good a chance of being something completely new as it does being something that we've seen before. If it's going to be something that we've seen before, my gut instinct pull would be Omega, because he's one of the few old school things of that degree of power, or at least close to it, that you could bring it back. Some might say like the Black Guardian, except Black Guardian kind of got clowned on a bit in the classic era enough that, I guess modern era hasn't seen him, so I guess maybe you could. I don't know. I kind of expected something else completely that might be tied to something we've seen, but my guess is it's not actually going to be something we've seen before. But what could it be? I don't know. I'm going to wait around and find out. That I do expect to be something that Davies himself answers. I don't necessarily expect him to be the one to follow up on the tooth. I do expect him to be the one to follow up on the He Who Waits, which it is funny to me that a lot of people, especially who were frustrated with Chris Chibnall's era as showrunner, kind of turned to Loki, especially its first season. Is like, see, this is giving me the feelings that Doctor Who isn't right now. And I do like Loki a lot. I never quite connected to it on that level, but I will admit, He Who Waits gives me a little bit of a taste of He Who Remains. I think it's just the similar weighty language. I don't think there's meant to be an actual connection drawn there. But look, we'll see. I don't really have a coherent theory. So I think that's everything. Wow, I went on a long time. I don't know how long this is going to end up. Like I've now got to sit down and edit this thing. Things that I will follow up on. As I said, I will take a look at the behind the scenes stuff and the interviews with RTD and decide if I have another video in me worth of stuff to talk about that. I kind of suspect not, but we'll see. I have seen the reveal of Ncuti Gatwa's Sonic Screwdriver. I'm going to do a short on that, probably out, I don't know, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't know. But I do have some thoughts on that, just not enough for a full video. So I think that'll about wrap it up. Thanks so much for tuning in. There was obviously a lot to talk about, and I didn't really sum up my overall opinion, which, if you couldn't guess, I like this. It did take me some time to come to the conclusion that I like the bi-generation. And the reason I like it is because of the storytelling it enables to happen. As an event unto itself, I'm not that thrilled about it, and I definitely don't want to ever see it happen again. But I've seen the immediate result of what story we get because it happened, and I like that a lot. So, between how much fun I had in the first half and how warm the last third, I guess, or so of the episode made me, yeah, I like this one a fair bit. Previously on Council of Geeks.
Am I going to have to do a separate thing on why I think the bi-generation is good and a lot of the arguments I hear against it don't make sense to me? I don't know if that's something worth doing or not. Let me know.
And now on Council of Geeks. Well, you asked for it. Okay, couple of videos back, I said that if there was enough interest, I would do a video talking about my thoughts on bi-generation, specifically why I think it works, and more specifically than that, addressing some of the common complaints that I see and hear against it. Because a lot of them don't make a ton of sense to me, or at least not enough to make me not like it. So a lot of this I did already talk about when I did my actual review of the Giggle. Feel free to check that out there. But this will not be strictly reiterative, because there I gave my explanation for why I like it. But because I put my review out before reading anybody else's reaction, I didn't know what the common complaints were. And now I do. And this is not strictly supposition. I did my best to try and supplement what I was already seeing out and about in the world. I did a poll both on the community tab here on my YouTube channel as well as on Twitter, and the results were more or less comparable. Twitter was a little harsher in terms of not liking the bi-generation, but not by all that much, and that also isn't super surprising to me. If you're voting on the thing on my community tab, then you probably watch my channel and may have heard me make my arguments already, or are in general just a little bit more positive on Doctor Who, whereas putting it out in the wild on Twitter, yeah, probably snag a bit more negativity. But both seemed overall fairly consistent, at least in terms of what got most votes, second most votes, and then third most between it's good, it's mid, it's bad. So I also asked for people to leave their comments about what they did or didn't like about it. I especially wanted to hear from people who didn't like it. And I've gone through those replies. I'm not going to address every single thing, because there were some things that like cropped up and I didn't quite know what to do with, largely because they were like one-offs. Like one person worded something in a way that like, well, I haven't seen it that way before, but if I included all that, this would be forever. So I have narrowed it down to the ones I was seeing repeatedly. So if you have an issue with it that I didn't address, that's probably why. But in any case, why don't we start with a little bit of a reminder of what happened in the Doctor Who episode, The Giggle. Well, the 14th Doctor, being played by David Tennant, who had previously played the 10th Doctor, this is the first instance of an actor coming back and playing a new incarnation of the Doctor again.
What?
And he gets killed, effectively, more or less. He gets injured in a way that would kill him, and then that kicks off regeneration. That's how regeneration has usually worked. And what happens in the moment is, instead of him being replaced by the next Doctor, who we already knew was going to be Ncuti Gatwa, that casting had been announced, instead, they kind of split, and we get what gets referred to as a bi-generation, which is something that shouldn't be able to happen, but seems to largely be an influence of the presence of the Celestial Toymaker, who is the villain of it. Him just being around is bending a lot of rules, and that gets brought up in a couple of things, and it's been suggested is going to be part of leading things into a more supernatural direction in the upcoming season. But I'm not going to get too speculative on that. In general, I don't do that anyway, and I'm definitely not doing that here. But in any case.
Bi-generation. I have bi-generated. There's no such thing. Bi-generation is supposed to be a myth.
That has never happened before. And what that meant was, for the final stretch of the episode, Ncuti Gatwa and David Tennant were sharing the screen together, which, like, multi-Doctor stories have been a thing, but in a regeneration story, no, that's new. And at the very end, basically, Ncuti Gatwa told him, hey, you need to chill. You have got a lot of issues you need to deal with. And I know you will, because I'm okay, and I come after you.
Fine. I'm fine because you fix yourself. We're Time Lords. We're doing rehab out of order.
But you need to go off and sort yourself so that I can be okay.
You're saying you need to stop.
I don't know how.
And David Tennant's 14th Doctor effectively retires. and he goes and lives with Donna Noble and her family. He does have his own TARDIS, but he's relaxed. He's not rushing about saving the world. He's just having a happy ending of a calm, retired life. Something that no Doctor has had before. And the way that the show is kind of structured, no Doctor could have unless you were going to end the show altogether. The Doctor can't stop. The Doctor can't retire if you want to keep the show going. So that's what happened. What did I like about it? Well, it's worth noting at this point, because this was also something that was mentioned a lot in the comments. On paper, this is not a good idea. I think this is a mess of an idea. We've had too much like stuff getting messed with in weird ways that hasn't really gone well. I mean, that was a lot of Chibnall's era, the previous showrunner. But like this, on paper, I hate this idea. And actually, honestly, I'm still not sure it's a good idea as far as the concept in and of itself. Why I came around on it was what it enabled to happen. And most specifically, that it enabled a Doctor to have a happy ending. Because as I said, the format of the show kind of means that can't ever happen if the show's going to keep going. So this was something that was never in the cards, that a Doctor could retire, relax, just be happy, take care of himself and those around him. That was never going to happen. This choice, this bi-generation, enables that to happen. And I'll point out, in my particular case, it doesn't matter to me that it was Tennant in particular. I think, at least for why I like it, this would have worked just as well had it been any previous Doctor that is where the actor is still around. I think this would have been just as powerful and just as effective if it was Eccleston, if it was Matt Smith, if it was Peter Capaldi. I mean, it couldn't really be Jodie Whittaker. She's the one who just... Although, that would be odd. Like, regenerate into herself. Screw it. I'll put that on the table as well. Like, I think that just this idea of any Doctor being able to retire is a wonderful thing. It's a powerful story. And it's one that it never occurred to me we could even get. And I like that we've now had it. I don't ever want to see it done again. This was something for me to appreciate as oh, that's what that feels like. To have a Doctor retire and be happy, this is what that feels like. I didn't think I'd ever get to feel that. Oh, that's nice. That's what I really love about it. And for me, as a bonus, we actually get more time with Ncuti Gatwa than is standard from most incoming Doctors in a regeneration story. But hold on to that thought. I'm going to circle back into it when I start addressing some of the common complaints. But that is the main thrust of why I really like it. Now, there's one other thing that's worth noting. This is not the first time that regeneration has been done weird. This is kind of the first time where regeneration has been done weird in the modern era since the show's revival in 2005. Since then, regeneration has been very consistent in terms of how it has been handled and how it's been depicted. It's always the yellow lights and then the Doctor is wonky for a little bit. Usually the TARDIS explodes. That was something that really needed to stop. I'm glad they didn't do that in this one. But it's been incredibly consistent. That consistency is actually kind of new. There was not a hard set of rules for how regeneration worked in the classic era, and some of those were weird. The fourth Doctor's regeneration into the fifth Doctor, Tom Baker into Peter Davison, is notoriously weird and wonky because it's this whole thing with this other being, the Watcher, that's been seen across the story, who's kind of like an omen of death, not literally, but metaphorically within the story. And when the Doctor regenerates, the Watcher joins with him and they become the next Doctor. That's never happened before, and that's never really had a proper explanation. But it's worth noting that weird stuff with regenerations has happened. So it's not completely unprecedented to do something different, something weird. That, I guess, will start to lead us into me addressing some of the common criticisms and complaints that I saw. And like I said, most of these I don't agree with, and I'm going to try and be fair. I don't want to be mocking, and I don't want to come across like I think people are foolish for having these opinions. Your opinion is your opinion, but I am going to explain why those don't quite land right for me in most cases. First up, there was a notion that a few people put forward of David Tennant fatigue. In a way, I kind of get this, but in another way, I kind of don't. So I do get this insofar as he continues to be the face that is most frequently the front of things being pushed. So if you look outside of the show, yes, he hadn't been on the show since the Day of the Doctor during Matt Smith's era. That was a multi-Doctor story. But, you know, he's frequently the face of things for comics, for novels. He's done more than a fair bit of stuff with Big Finish and audio adventures and things like that. And a lot of the merch and the references, and when people reference Doctor Who, it's more liable to be him. And there is kind of a certain ubiquity to that. So on the one hand, I do kind of get starting to feel like Tennant is becoming the face of a show that really should be far, far bigger than him, and being a little bit annoyed with that. I do get that. I'm a little bit confused as to why the bi-generation in particular sets that off, as opposed to when Whittaker regenerated into him. Because I would think that, like, that would put you off the entire 3 specials. Star Beast, Why Blue Yonder, and the Giggle. Because it kind of did for me, or at least prepped me to be put off. And that wasn't because I was tired of Tennant in particular. It's because I've always thought bringing back an old actor to play a new regeneration was a bad idea and an unhealthy thing for the show to do from a creative sense and like just being able to move forward, because it's so looking back. Ultimately, I turned around on it, not just because of the Giggle, but because across those 3 specials, I really appreciated what the show did with the idea of him coming back with an old face. And I think that, I would say to the least extent in the first one, the Star Beast, but across the 3 to varying degrees, telling stories and taking advantage of the fact that he is back and doing things in a way that wouldn't have been done or wouldn't have played the same if it was a completely fresh face for those specific stories. So again, not to make this about Chibnall, but to sort of make the comparison, a big thing that really annoyed me about Chris Chibnall's era when Jodie Whittaker was the Doctor was him doing things, and then I would go like, okay, I don't think that's a good idea, but I guess I'll see what he does with it. And then he did nothing with it. So, I mean, just having something where like, that's not a good idea, but I'll see what they do with it, and something was actually done with it, and I ended up liking the things done with it, yeah, that does it for me. But coming back to what I was saying before, if you're tired of Tennant, were you put off from all the specials? Because people are giving that as a reply for disliking the bi-generation in specific, which strikes me as a little odd, except for one other connected thing that did come up a lot, which is people being, to some degree, frustrated or concerned that there's another Doctor still hanging around, and that it's Tennant in particular. Now, this is one of the ones that I think has some of the most nuance to it, and it also rides most of them, not all of them, but most of the comments along these lines have a massive overriding assumption that he's going to come back. Like, he's hanging around. He's on Earth. Of course he's going to show up again. Of course they're going to bring him back. Now, I have the opposite assumption. I am assuming that they aren't going to bring him back. I don't think they will. Now, that is my assumption clashing with the assumption of people who are frustrated at the idea of like, well, they're going to do something else with him. You just know they are. And you might think, okay, well, agree to disagree. You have competing assumptions. I do have a little bit of precedent on my side, though, which is this kind of happened with David Tennant already. If you've seen Series 4, he almost died there and he managed to continue going on, but there was a weird thing that went on because he got his hand chopped off before. It's not worth explaining the whole thing, but his hand grew a rest of him, and that became known as the Meta-Crisis Doctor, who was ultimately left in a parallel dimension, completely sealed off with Rose Tyler. Now, I assumed when that happened, oh, they're gonna bring him back eventually. the meta-crisis doctor in particular. They're going to bring him back eventually. Of course they are. Why would they do this if they're never going to bring him back? They never did. Even when David Tennant came back, it was never the meta-crisis doctor. He didn't come back for Day of the Doctor. He didn't come back for this. There was an existing David, like, they could have, I mean, they chose not to, but they could have had, for some reason, the meta-crisis doctor return. And that's who's in the specials. And we don't even see who Whittaker regenerated into. And this kind of is happening, like, almost in parallel, or while Ncuti Gatwa's doctor is recovering from the regeneration or whatever. Like, they could have brought him back. They didn't. They did this instead. So I'm not taking it as a given that he's going to be brought back, because I think, this is a presumption on my part, but I think the reason the meta-crisis doctor never came back is because his story was done. Ultimately, he was created to give Rose Tyler a happy ending and to allow her to have a doctor with her in this other dimension where she was not going to be able to come back from. And that meant that both her story and the meta-crisis doctor, the function he was made to fulfill, their story is done. There isn't a reason to bring him back that doesn't undo the ending of that story. And I think that Russell T. Davies, RTD, the showrunner who wrote both of these things, understands that. And I think his understanding of that is why he won't bring back this doctor either. Not like for a story. It is possible that maybe he'll at some point come back to like tie off the end of his regeneration, which, okay, that'll actually be the next thing. But just to wrap up with this real quick. So in general, I think part of people's sense of Tennant fatigue is an acceptance of the inevitability that, well, you know he's going to come back. They're going to bring him back, like, but his story's done. And if people are going to make a logistical argument of like, but if Earth is in danger, he's not just going to sit in the garden. It's like, yes, he is. Yes, he is. Because the doctor's going to take care of it. And that doesn't have to be him anymore. Now, it would be in the best interest of maintaining that story for, at the very least, throughout Ncuti Gatwa's run, for whatever things threaten Earth in specific to be manageable and not seem like, well, there's going to be massive collateral damage, even if the current doctor, if Ncuti Gatwa's doctor can handle it. Best not to go too big scale, because then it would become a question of, wait, is the other doctor really not going to step into this? Because that could get a little dicey. But in my overall opinion, in terms of what the purpose of this is, like, yeah, he is just going to stay. He's not going to jump in and help. It's not his job anymore. His story's done. But as I said, the one way I could see him coming back is if they want to tie off his regeneration. But we don't even know if that's necessary, which kind of brings me to the next thing, which is people complained about how bigeneration worked. That was not really fully explained. Exactly what it is and how it worked and the full mechanics and logistics. Some people were annoyed that they still don't really get it. Now, for people hung up on the logistics, I don't really have a counter argument to that other than a matter of personal preference. Because for me, I understand it as well as I need to for this story to work. That being that this doctor, whatever goes on in his life, is still, even as he's existing in parallel with the Ncuti Gatwa doctor, this is all in the Ncuti Gatwa doctor's past. Because he had that line,
"We're Time Lords, we're doing rehab out of order."
So even as they exist in parallel in time, that whatever the 14th Doctor goes through is already something that the 15th Doctor remembers experiencing and gets to benefit from, i.e. calming down, sorting himself out, and all that. Which is why, again, as a benefit to all this, the 15th Doctor gets to just be happy and joyful, which we haven't really had in the modern era, because initially with the Time War and then just in general how things have gone, there's always been something heavy weighing on the Doctor. The Doctor hasn't gotten to just be like the closest was the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith. He was silly, but like there was still something burdening him in the back of his head. The 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, like she wasn't great at making connections. She didn't connect with her companions well because she was always holding back to some degree. Shedding all the baggage is another thing that is enabled by the bi-generation. But again, the full logistics of, so wait, does the 14th Doctor, is he going to regenerate again? Or are there now parallel tracks? Short answer to that is no, at least not by how it's explained. Because again, with what little we get, 15 is still what comes after 14. There isn't an alternate 15. So how that works fully logistically, does it mean that when the 14th Doctor eventually dies of whatever, however that happens, he just remerges with 15, or he just dies and vanishes and that regeneration energy is just somehow transported, or just it doesn't even need to be? I don't know. But for my purposes and for what I get out of the story, I also don't really need to know. But I also know that people who are more into lore and into rules and into the logistics, yeah, they are hung up in not knowing exactly how this worked and not knowing exactly how it's going to play out. I get it. I just don't share it. I am going to circle back on the idea of David Tennant still being around. I will say that my optimism and my enjoyment on this, as I mentioned, is on the assumption that he isn't ever going to come back. If they do bring him back, like to participate in a story, or good grief, heaven forbid he like take over for a special or a stretch of a series, yeah, I'm going to be real annoyed. Because what that would do, if it happens, and I don't assume that it is, in fact, I assume very, very sharply that it won't, but that would kind of undercut Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor. And that notion of undercutting, shortchanging, or stealing the thunder of the 15th Doctor, of Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, is another one of the major recurring things. This is another one that I don't really get. Because people cite the bi-generation as, well, Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor doesn't get his moment to shine. He had to share the screen. He had his thunder stolen by David Tennant, and I don't get this one. And I'll explain why. The first is, just by comparison, he gets so much more screen time than has ever been afforded to the incoming Doctor in a regeneration story. You want to know how it usually works? Usually, in the modern era, the regeneration happens, new Doctor gets one scene, maybe only one line.
Oh, brilliant.
And then it ends, and you have to wait to see them again later. There's not a lot of thunder to steal there. The thunder, the actual highlight, the spotlight, is in their first full story as the Doctor, which for Ncuti Gatwa would be Church on Ruby Road. The incoming Doctor having this much screen time, that's unprecedented. He gets way more time to shine than any incoming Doctor ever has. I got way more a sense of who he was in his time because of that in that story. Generally, what I get out of the regeneration, like, it's one line, like, I can't gauge your personality off that. Like, at all. I can't gauge your personality off of new teeth. That's weird. I can't gauge your personality off of still not ginger. I can't gauge your personality off of I have new kidneys. I can't gauge your personality off of, oh, brilliant. I can't gauge your personality off of I know these teeth. But I can gauge a personality off of how much time we get with Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor. There was one person, I was sent this TikTok, and I'm not going to clip it because this is a much smaller account and I'm not trying to call this out, but one specific thing he said, and I kind of lost it a little bit. I'm not going to show you the clip because I'm not trying to put a target on anybody's back, but I am going to quote it. This is his time. This is his moment. Imagine if they'd done that with Matt Smith or Peter Capaldi. Motherfucker, they did do it with Peter Capaldi. Peter Capaldi's first full story as the 12th Doctor was Deep Breath. At the end of Deep Breath, Matt Smith's Doctor appears in a time-displaced phone call. And you know what? People at the time were ticked. Not everybody, probably in percentages of the same people who think the bi-generation is bad, but some people were really ticked saying that that stole the thunder from the incoming Doctor, stealing some of the spotlight from Peter Capaldi. And there, while I don't agree, I do think there was a much better case to be made there because his first full story, that is his time to shine. And the Matt Smith Doctor nudged in on that a little bit. But you know what the other thing is? Yeah, people were ticked. Does anybody still complain about that? No, clearly people don't even seem to freaking remember that happened. And it's also worth mentioning to compare it to Classic because, yeah, I feel like a lot of fans are only comparing it to modern day. Like, let's go back to Classic. Most new incoming Doctors didn't even get a line of dialogue. You just saw the face change. That was it. Maybe a sentence or two.
What's happened?
Change, my dear. And it seems not a moment too soon.
And like the weird wonkiness of 6 into 7, but that's for complicated reasons that I'm not going into. But this amount of screen time in the regeneration story itself, this has never happened before. And that's what I mean when I say I don't get that people think that just because he was sharing the screen with Tennant, it somehow stepped on his moment. I got so much of a sense of him, far better than I've ever gotten of any Doctor on their first appearance, because he got more time, he got to do more, he got to say more. I don't get this complaint. Again, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I just don't get it. Another thing that I saw was some people saying that having another Doctor around, even if he doesn't come back again, sort of gives ammo to the people who are going to say, well, Ncuti Gatwa isn't the real Doctor. The real Doctor is in a garden with Donna. And I would see sort of a general resistance to the idea of giving ammo to people who probably just don't want a Black Doctor. And the thing is, a few years ago, I would have agreed. I was against the idea of giving like a sort of spin-off or miniseries to the 8th Doctor, which some people were clamoring for after the Night of the Doctor, for this exact reason. I felt it would split the fan base. Unfortunately, what I've learned in the time since then is the fan base is already split. And it's not like if the 14th Doctor wasn't around, these people were suddenly going to accept Ncuti Gatwa. And while I understand the gut instinct to not give ammo to bigots, the thing is, they're gonna come up with something. No matter what we do, if they don't like that a Black person was cast as the Doctor, they're gonna bitch about it, whether it's this way or some other way. So I don't believe it's a good idea to hamper storytelling in a vain and futile attempt to shut these people up, because they never will. Yes, some people may point to the 14th Doctor as a reason to not accept the 15th Doctor, but they're still making a conscious choice to not accept the 15th Doctor, and I do not believe they would have if this didn't happen. So f*** them. Now there's one other major thing, and one minor thing tied to it that got brought up a fair few times. And that had to do very specifically with disliking what Russell T Davies, what RTD said about bi-generation in, I believe it was the commentary track on the Giggle. And what it basically amounts to is he said that in that moment, bi-generation happened for every Doctor in the past as well. And people who are aware that he said that, have largely been pretty vocal that they think that's a terrible idea. And to be clear, I agree. But I'm going to repeat something that I've said before, and I'll keep saying it as many times as I have to. Commentaries are not canon. Interviews are not canon. Behind-the-scenes comments are not canon. The show is canon. So unless that ever gets depicted on the show proper, it's not canon. What he shared with you was, for all intents and purposes, his fan theory of what happened to every other Doctor. I don't think that is ever going to get confirmed. And before some of you pedants, oh, but it is confirmed because that explains Tales from the TARDIS and why the Doctors are older. That is not required for Tales from the TARDIS to work. You listen to some of the lines delivered by some of those Doctors.
Believe it or not, I woke up in here myself. I think it's a memory.
Oh, time marches on, Perry, even for a Time Lord.
Time streams are funny things. And some I regenerate, and others I don't. It's all a matter of perspective.
There's just Nothing indicating that that is why this is going down the way it is, besides the fact it's debatable whether Tales from the TARDIS is canon. Because generally, the thing to remember with Doctor Who canon, there is a ton of ancillary stuff. There's the novels, there's the comics, there's the audio dramas, there's Tales from the TARDIS, there's the weird little bumper things in the advertisements for box sets of the classic era. Those all tie into the lore and characters, and some of them even advance plots and whatnot. If it isn't in the main show, the extent to which it is canon amounts to it's canon until the show says it isn't. Basically, anything that is not the show itself could be canon, and we have had some confirmation of some aspects of this being canon, but that doesn't canonize everything. But unless it's in the show, it's a thing that you can take into account or you can disregard. And I give no weight whatsoever to RTD's commentary track comment about this affecting all Doctors. Now, if that very idea you find so offensive that somehow ruins the thing for you, like I guess that's the thing that could happen. And I have nothing, to say about that. Is it a bad idea? Yeah. Is it ever going to come up? No. And I think some people have kind of connected to that, have gone with this idea that for some reason RTD wouldn't kill his darling, like he's unwilling to kill Tennant. And again, the people making that complaint would also cite the Metacrisis doctor. And yeah, I guess, but he did still retire him. Speaking as somebody who has that complaint of you won't kill your freaking character or you won't let them leave. And I have that complaint about Clara Oswald, which is a Moffat issue. Now, I've had that complaint about some characters and I just don't get the same energy. I don't get the sense of, I love this character too much and I can't let them go. What I get the sense of is I want to do something that'll work best if we have this character. And I want to give an ending that no other Doctor can have. So, granted, that's kind of a vibes thing. And that doesn't necessarily negate people's feeling that he just wouldn't let him die. And again, that kind of factors into the David Tennant fatigue thing. And I suppose the one other thing I'll mention is I do wonder and I kind of went off on it, but the thing with the stepping on Ncuti Gatwa's moment, I wonder if some of that is residual frustration from stuff that happened at the tail end of Whittaker's era, i.e. the announcement that RTD was coming in and that Ncuti Gatwa had been cast happened before Whittaker's last season even aired. And a lot of people at the time were annoyed by that. It's worth remembering that while that did happen as an official announcement, it happened so quick and so loose. It was just announced on a red carpet. I feel so firmly that they did it that way to get ahead of a leak because Doctor Who cannot keep secrets. The only way for something with this big a fan base to be able to maintain secrecy is to shoot the way Disney's been shooting a whole bunch of the Marvel and Star Wars stuff, in that fully locked off set. I don't even know what it's called. What is it, the volume? Whatever it is. It all looks like garbage, by the way, Disney. Stop using that. I know you're trying to get your money's worth out of the thing, but stop. But unless you have a completely locked down set, and which Doctor Who, even with Disney money behind it, cannot afford to do, stuff's going to leak out. We knew that Wilf was going to appear. He's literally only in one scene of those 3 specials, but that still got out. It still leaked. So I don't think that initial announcement of RTD coming back and Ncuti Gatwa's casting was something that was meant to step on anybody. I think it was done to get ahead of a leak. But I do still get that there was bitterness about that. And then, realizing that Tennant was coming back. And even though I held for a while a really strong feeling that no, Tennant, they're not going to have her regenerate into him, even when all the rumors were flying about, he's coming back and all this stuff. I'm they're still not going to do that. And, they did. So they kept, to a certain extent, certain aspects of it under wraps. But I think a general sense of a lot of this era was this is stepping on the end of Chibnall and Whittaker's era. And I wonder if there's some carryover into the Gatwa run that people are like, oh, you just keep stepping on everybody else's thing. And that, to me, just seems like misplaced frustration. I don't know. That's the one other aspect I'll give as far as that goes. But overall, while I understand where some of these come from, and some of them, like, it's a matter of a difference of how you approach things. Like, if not knowing the logistics bother you, fair. I have no counter to that. If you're just tired of Tennant and you couldn't even enjoy the specials because of that, fine, fair. But most of the rest of these, they are either based on faulty assumptions, like the assumption that, well, they're going to do more with it. He's going to come back. Like, I really don't think he is. And I may be wrong about that. And if I am, I'll be annoyed, and it'll actually spoil my enjoyment of the bi-generation. I'll cop to that right now. But for somebody as cynical as I tend to be, I'm going to be optimistic on that one. I think it's done. And I don't agree that it stepped on Ncuti Gatwa's moment. I don't agree that it ruins things or that it messes up regeneration any more than regeneration was already a loosey-goosey mess in the first dang place. I guess overall, it's just something that I get why people don't like the idea. I don't like the idea. Still, even, I don't like the idea. But they did something with it that I really liked. Now, if you don't like what it did with the bi-generation, that also would be a reason to probably not like it. Because if I didn't like the result of what happened because of the bi-generation, I probably wouldn't like it either. But I do. So, even as I'm going in and saying, I'm going to take apart these arguments against it, like, none of this is objective. This is something that happened to land well with me, and I keep seeing arguments from people who it didn't land for and kind of cocking my head at a lot of them. So I just wanted to address that. Thank you very much for tuning in for this compilation experiment. We'll see how it goes. I've heard sometimes people like to put me on in the background. Maybe you even like to fall asleep to my voice. I would like to think different aspects of my voice would be better for that, but those aren't really on display on this particular channel. So I hope that this was enjoyable for you, however you choose to engage with it. So thank you very much for joining me. Patreon pays the bills and is what enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Thoughts down in the comments if you like this compilation, if you want to see more, if you have suggestions on how I could structure other compilations, I'm certainly open to them, but don't worry too much about it. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You're the council, I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned. Now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Subin Lutfulla, Andicate 808, Mara G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Movie Turtle, Oliver B, The Baba Duchess, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Mary Mello, Becky Sparks, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pau Baraba Joggle, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. I also want to give my thanks to all the supporters who didn't get named because you are all indeed very nifty people. You could be a nifty person too if you go support me on Patreon, and there's the clause. Ugh.